Alright, all you appreciators, now is time to get to some appreciating. Unlike Sledgehammer Games, Treyarch is a company with a long history before getting reeled into the Call of Duty conveyor belt. It was founded by Peter Aikman and Dogan Koslu. Koslu is, I believe, how you pronounce it. It's Koslu. These two took the company down the avenue of making sports games to extreme sports games and eventually selling the company to Activision in 2001. Treyarch proceeded to become a powerhouse for Spider-Man games, with the most notable being the legendary, fucking super badass Spider-Man 2 video game, which I'm sure someday I'll make a video about it. Nobody tops the bad boy known as Spider-Man 2 though, if I'm judging purely off nostalgia and not judging basically on every technologically objective factor that makes Insomniac's Spider-Man game better. It's still a great game though, still a great game. I'm not dissing it. I love Spider-Man 2. Treyarch in 2001 saw themselves in a bad place, seeing that they were not always the most financially successful, but with a talented crew, they were able to be bought out in 2001 by Activision, then proceeded to make one of the worst video games on the PS2 called the Minority Report video game, and yes, based on the Minority Report movie of the same name. I'm not gonna crap on them that much though, because they did make a slew of Spider-Man games that are actually really fun, from Spider-Man 1 all the way to Spider-Man 3, and they even did Ultimate Spider-Man, which is an underrated gem. They made some great games around this time, with their first notable installment for Call of Duty being Call of Duty 2 Big Red One. Treyarch developed this with Grey Matter Interactive, another studio owned under Activision at the time. After this, they both merged into one company, with Activision's eyes set on making another powerhouse Call of Duty focused company. Games taking longer development times in the 7th generation console era meant that Call of Duty, to be able to continue having its annual releases, they were going to need 2 developers instead of just Infinity Ward doing everything. I will say I do not consider Big Red One though to be a mainline entry in the Call of Duty series, so it will not be talked about too much in this video. But they did get something right with it, because immediately after that game came out, they started working on their next entry, Call of Duty 3. I can confidently say though that Big Red One is pretty much worth playing in its entirety. It's a great expansion. The founders of Treyarch, Peter and Dogan, did not stay around in the picture much longer once Call of Duty became Treyarch's calling. Peter Aikman by Call of Duty 3 had already been moving on and eventually becoming president in 2008 of United States, just kidding, of Skydance Interactive, which is a VR company. You might recognize it as a film company behind the Paramount Star Trek films, but the game studio focuses heavily on VR games, with their most famous being Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. Dogan went down a similar path, working with AR and VR type games that are being produced by former Treyarch employees or former friends of his. These two legends need to be brought up though in this video, because they are the reason that Treyarch exists. They are the reason that Treyarch got sold to Activision, and their departure was the beginning of the foundation era of Call of Duty that Treyarch finished off. Activision might not have planned on converting Treyarch fully into a Call of Duty company when they bought them, but in order to be able to score that annual winning streak that Call of Duty is known for nowadays, from 2007 to 2023 being the best-selling game every single year, they had to have Treyarch focus their sights on filling that gap between Call of Duty 2 and Infinity Ward's next hit, Modern Warfare 1. In case you don't already know, this is part 2 of a 4-part series where I break down the developer journey and review each game in the series in retrospect. I will be ranking all of them at the end of this series in part 4, and I hope to have all the episodes out by the end of the year. An Infinity Ward retrospective will be part 3, and part 4 will be ranking the campaigns, the multiplayers, zombies, talking about the state of Call of Duty, and talking about Modern Warfare 3 and why it is my last Call of Duty I'm ever gonna buy. I will also explain to anyone new that I have a timeline sheet that is broken up into eras for Call of Duty. These eras reflect the general audience perspective of Call of Duty at the time. Not every game in the Dark Ages do I hate, and not every game in the Golden Age do I love. It's a generalization for the audience when these Call of Duty games were coming out. Infinite Warfare was the most disliked trailer on YouTube ever, and that shows where the Call of Duty community's feelings were around those years. You can also see that 3 games have been erased. These are from the Sledgehammer Games video that I did previously. The last thing I want to say before we begin is I am only discussing the launch versions of these titles. Free DLC, and that's it. I will not be talking about the paid content, so I am sorry to all of you Zombie Chronicles lovers out there. Zombies Chronicles will be brought up, some of the DLCs will be brought up, but it will not be considered in the evaluation of the game as a review. So sit back, grab your popcorn, and get ready to agree and disagree about Treyarch Game Studios. Activision was planning on just using Treyarch to just fill in time for Infinity Ward to create Modern Warfare 1. They were just doing a filler job. This can be seen by them still releasing other games outside of Call of Duty between 3 and World at War with the FPS Quantum of Solace. They were seen as nobodies to the Call of Duty community, basically just a group of devs that were going to do a job to give more time to the big boys. The filler job they were given, though, became Treyarch's proving ground. Treyarch decided to actually try, creating engaging storylines, unmatched Call of Duty atmosphere, creating zombies, and arguably being the best Call of Duty company, even surpassing Infinity Ward, the ones who literally made this series. So with all this inevitable success, you may be wondering why the founders left before the success even began. Well guys, Treyarch wasn't always the top dog Call of Duty studio. They were given one filler Call of Duty job, Call of Duty 3. They had an 8 months of development time on this entire game. And this first game being just a filler job, it was not the start of their greatness. It's honestly arguably their low point. Because the company that was seen just for a filler job becomes one hell of an underdog story. So if I wanted to chat about every single leader or development hurdle that Treyarch had to tackle, I'll be here all day. You're going to hear names like Mark Lamia, Corky Lemcall, Craig Houston, Brian Toohey, Jimmy, my boy Jimmy Zelensky, Jason Blundell, Dave Anthony, Pat Dwyer, David King, David Vonderhaar, and David S. Goyer. If hearing all these names confused the living hell out of you, that's good, because it does for me too. Since it was so confusing writing down all my notes for this, I boiled it down in a simple way to convey. Instead of doing this the way of following every developer at every point in their career, we are just going to do a brief summary of the development struggles on each game and some of the developer evolution. The devs that played a major role in the advancements or the negatives to a specific game whenever it's brought up. Not all the devs are going to be brought up for every single game, otherwise this video would be confusing and 10 hours long, so we're not doing it. You're going to hear repeats of names, you're going to hear repeats of conflicts, you're going to hear my own personal speculation, and you will hear people who left the company as well. Through it all though, I'll be constantly reminding you who is who, so with that in mind,
shall we begin?
Peter Ankman and Dogan Koslu might have left for the same reason, might have not. It's all speculative. My assumption is the stress of Treyarch being lured into becoming a massive Call of Duty developer, and the stress of that 8-month development time was possibly the main reasons for the departure of Peter Aikman and Dogan Koslu. There was also the merger with Grey Matter Interactive and Treyarch when working on Big Red One. This probably did not help at all as well, possibly making the two, Peter and Dogan, feel like that Treyarch was unrecognizable after the merger's completion. This merger and the short development time on Call of Duty 3 could have led to the departure of both of these people, but who knows? The one thing I do know is that we got to start talking about Call of Duty and get to the success of Treyarch. Because if the main point of this video is about the rise of Treyarch in the Call of Duty space, then that means we gotta start at the bottom. That bottom being Call of Duty 3. Call of Duty 3 had one of the shortest development times for any Call of Duty game ever, possibly even the shortest, and it shows. Due to the lack of hype for the original Modern Warfare in 2007 that this game arguably caused, I could see there being a great case that without Modern Warfare 1, Call of Duty would have gone the same route as Medal of Honor. The development team really struggled to get this one out. They don't even sound enthusiastic about it in interviews. Like, you know it's bad when they're obsessing over grass effects. Which, to their credit, this was a big deal going into the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, but that's your talking points for your entire game? The only new stuff he mentions is a class system that is only in multiplayer, vehicles which are severely underdeveloped, and that's really it. Everything else he says is in the previous two titles. The only other exception is not even in gameplay, it's the cutscenes leading up to the gameplay that are vastly improved off of its two predecessors. But most would expect this being the case with next-gen technology being used for this game. Now, I know I'm about to be crapping on a game that had 8 months worth of development time, but it's just sad that this is what the developers had to go through. There's some stuff I will be positive about, but I am being honest when I say that this is the most negative portion of this entire video. Richard Farrelly was the game director on this, and he has moved to being one of the lead level designers for Infinity Ward after World at War. Jason Blundell is the only name, though, that you will hear from this game that will be repeated later on. He was a top producer on Call of Duty 3, and this man's name will come back up repeatedly, especially when speaking about zombies in the later games like Black Ops 3 and onward. In an interview with Richard Farrelly and Jason Blundell, they discussed that due to the development time being so short, they could not capture the full extent of the game that they would have liked. They still mentioned that it sold well and that it was rated well, but that it was not the vision that they wished they could have captured. And this is honestly when we get into my first complaint about Call of Duty 3's story. The developers speak on how you're going to be playing in the most epic, dangerous battles that drove out the Nazi army in World War II. Sounds awesome on paper. The intro of the game is also pretty intimidating and starts with these words: "The bloodiest battle of the war." That's awesome. That's so creepy. I love it. Sure, you immediately get slapped with a dumb tutorial and blah blah blah, everybody around you starts talking and everything, but overall this is great. Like, this opening shot, just look at this. That's such a cool opening shot. I love that. But what does the game devolve into? You may be thinking that I was showing you clips this entire time from the same mission because it all looks very similar, but I haven't. I have shown you clips from 6 different missions, all of which look and feel nearly identical. 6 missions is nearly half the game's length, and outside of a few standout moments or 1 or 2 missions, this game is boring. Also, why does this developer sound like Joe Rogan?
Where there is a second Cold War, so you have these parallel Cold Wars going on.
Sorry. Back on topic. You travel through endless forests with a few nameless soldiers. The game does not have any more NPCs than any previous Call of Duty, even though they would pretend in interviews like it was going to have a huge amount of NPCs.
A lot of ways. Grass, trees that move, grass that is affected by wind and explosions from your grenades and mortar rounds. Just the sheer number of guys on screen. Just a lot of guys who in the past would have been maybe characters off in the distance that weren't.
Much bigger individual wow moments, more guys on screen. We tried to push the AI envelope, the particle system, so we have much more explosive content in the game.
And the game tries to make itself distinct by letting you play as different countries during the war, but this has been done before. This had been done in the previous 2 Call of Duty games, but it was done in a way where you played linear stories. You stuck with your crew for 3 to 4 missions, and then you moved on to the next country. Specifically in Call of Duty 2, each country had diversity in their environments, with snowy terrain for the Soviets, deserts for the British, or beaches and forests for the Americans. This game shows you angles from different countries, but as I showed you earlier, for at least the first half of the game, it all looks exactly the same. It's stuck in the same endless forests, and now with a story that's non-linear, so you're hopping around from country to country. You already don't really care about any of these characters, but now you don't even remember what they're doing. I wouldn't mind this non-linearity if you added different terrains to each country's story, but my problem is that they don't even do that. I will fully admit that Call of Duty 2's British Desert campaign is the most boring out of the 3 campaigns. And maybe it would even benefit if they did do a non-linear fashion, where you could do a snow mission with the Soviets, then a desert mission with the British, and then a beach mission with the Americans, and then back to a snow mission. It would allow you to visually recognize which country you are with, and makes it easy to keep up with in terms of their stories. Well, and this would also allow you to have the variety, so you're never getting bored. Call of Duty 3 is the worst of both worlds, though, with non-interesting characters, no level diversity outside of a tank mission and 1 mission that I will get into later. And it has a boring non-linear narrative to the point where I can't even remember what my group is doing in any of the countries that we're witnessing. Sometimes they cross paths, especially towards the end of the game, where one country's push into Nazi territory will help out another country. But in general, this does not make anything more interesting. This is also part of the no diversity in environments with each country problem, because since they are all on the same campaign against Nazi Germany, it means that every area looks and feels almost identical. Normally, these games are globe-trotting adventures that give you a lot of material to work with, but this game only tackles 1 campaign against Nazi Germany. So if the story is so boring and the mission variety is just woods, then how long does the intro remain amazing because I said that the very beginning of the game is really cool? Well, the first mission is actually one of the best parts of the game, and I can explain this very easily. It was created before the game even started development. This whole first mission was the demo that was shown to Activision to greenlight Call of Duty 3, and then it was shown as the demo at E3. This shows the lack of confidence that Activision and Treyarch had in everything outside of the first mission. They based most of their marketing around this first mission because it was visually stunning, it's intense, and it is the most massive battle that we see in the entire game. It doesn't rely too heavily on lame quick-time events that feel spliced in just to add some cinematic feel to Call of Duty. I swear to God, cinematic was a term being tossed around so much in the 7th generation of consoles. The mid-2000s was a time where when you heard cinematic in a video game, it either meant you were playing the greatest game ever, like Uncharted 2 or Mass Effect, or it meant you were playing Call of Duty 3 or the storyline of Battlefield 3. The quality dips and quality heights of video games whenever they were labeled as cinematic during the 7th generation of consoles was utterly insane. The rest of the game has missions that change themselves from the standard go point A to point B in Call of Duty 2 in order to let you tackle 3 objectives at once and choose which one you're going to do first. This does sound amazing. It would have worked, the agency that the player would have felt, but this happens so often in the game that it ends up feeling more repetitive than just a well-paced going from point A to point B level would. Call of Duty 2 and 1 would have massive areas you could walk around in between point A and point B, while Call of Duty 3 would just have small areas until it was a blow up 3 AA turrets or blow up 3 tank moments. They would let you choose which one you were going to do first, or like blow up which tank in which order, but these multiple objective highlights, as brought up earlier, are so filled to the brink, like throughout the entire game, to the point of near exhaustion. It doesn't feel special. It feels more like one of those dreaded, oh, flip the 3 switches in this area moment in other games. They all have the same approach, and they all feel like get out of level design jail free cards. The rest of the game was made on a crunch time interval after the first mission, and that explains why the first mission is really one of the only good parts about the entire game. But I've been teasing you all for too long on the one mission that I do love. It's called hostage. This is what they wanted Call of Duty 3 to be. Call of Duty 3, more than anything else, tries to flex that it is bigger, it has vehicles, and that you have multiple objectives. The problem with Call of Duty 3 is that it never feels bigger, the vehicles are only sparingly used, and the multiple objectives feel tiresome after a while. Hostage throws all that out the window. It's a mission where you're trying to save a few hostages that are scattered around villages nearby. You take your car, you take your Jeep, and you travel from one village to the next, to the next, to the next, saving hostages one by one, and the mission ends when you have all of them saved. It has a huge map, which some could argue is to its detriment, but I would argue this is exactly what Treyarch wanted most of Call of Duty 3 to feel like. Massive vehicle segments and multiple objectives that could allow for this open feeling level. Sure, it can get a little bit confusing at times with which road to go down, and you can kind of like lose your way. Like I swear I got lost all the time. But these are new problems to a new feeling level rather than the same underwhelming problems that plague the entire rest of the game. The mission feels heavily inspired off the second mission of Halo 1, where you travel around the Halo ring saving one Marine group at a time. It's not nearly as good as Halo 1's second mission, but that's also one of the greatest first-person shooter missions of all time. If I was, though, to make my favorite missions list in the Foundation era, this would easily break the top 10, and I don't think any other mission in this game would. It's memorable, it utilizes the new mechanics of the vehicles well because it promotes them since the map is so big, and the multiple objectives works well here because it's across the entire level rather than just one slightly big area in the span of an entire level that feels so small. Call of Duty 3 strives to be different from its predecessors, but almost always in worse ways than them. It's non-linear, which makes the forgettable stories even more forgettable because they do not have the terrain or gameplay defining attributes that help you remember what each respective country is doing in the story. It has same environments, which many would argue that's World War II, but we will see in World at War, and even the case for Call of Duty 2, that you can have different environments across your campaign. The campaign is also filled with elements to make it look cinematic, which with the cutscenes that does work, but with almost all the quick time events, it does not. The squad members are forgettable, where you will be hearing the same screamed out lines over and over and over again. This is a problem that I wish was fixed from Call of Duty 1 and Call of Duty 2. A lot of the other stuff they mention is barely noticeable, from the grass to the destructible environments in quotation marks, which you will hardly notice in your playthrough outside of scripted areas. To put it in perspective, Call of Duty 3 came out the same year as first-person shooters like Resistance, Fear, Black, Rainbow Six Vegas, Call of Juarez, Prey, and I would argue that Call of Duty 3 is not only the worst game out of all of these games surrounding it the year it came out, but it cannot even surpass its predecessor with the majority of its design choices. One of the absolute worst of the series, and what a way to finish off the Foundation period with Call of Duty 1 through 3. Surely they had to have devoted more time and focus to the multiplayer. Well, yes and no. My first impression of the multiplayer was, well, shit. People still play this game? I was able to find matches on the Xbox quicker for Call of Duty 3 than I was able to find matches for Call of Duty Vanguard. Given these are not full matches, but I still think that's insane. That is the sad thing, though, if you do want to play Call of Duty 3 online, because you cannot experience the game in its true 24-player glory online, because you will never find a match that is that populated. You will find matches with 10, 12, 15, whatever people, but never 24. Multiplayer in Call of Duty 3 is kind of a basket case, because while some of the changes, like making classes more definable by adding special abilities, such as you could play as a medic and be able to revive your teammates, that is a good idea on paper, even though it does sound like a copy of Battlefield, the competition for Call of Duty at the time. But I also said this in my previous video, and I will say it again. If you spend your whole life calling a game a copy of a previous game, then you'll probably hate most video games. Just acknowledge the game as a copy, but what makes Call of Duty 3's copied system different, and is the game better because of the copied system? That's what really matters. I won't deny that I was having some fun on the multiplayer, killing some time, and even would come back on it every now and then to kill about 30 minutes of my time, but I couldn't itch this feeling that every time I played it I had a severe mental illness while playing, because I could not figure out where anything is, what I was doing, and what was going on 90% of the time. I felt like I was in a fever dream normally. It was like I was trying to break down and explain the plot to a fucking Transformers movie to somebody.
Then the police went after them. Then the box hit the car, then it crashed into the ocean.
Whoa! Looks like this movie never slows
And
down.
it's not just turned the car going zoom.
My brain would just turn off and none of it would make any sense. So I got checked out by my doctor and I was not suffering of Alzheimer's, and it clicked to me. These maps are horrendous. These maps are not designed for the vehicles that are put on them. They're way too big for team deathmatch because they're trying to accommodate the vehicles, but using the vehicles on the maps makes the maps feel too small. There's literally no winning. This is possibly due to me never being able to reach that 24 player count, but that aside, the maps just feel poorly developed. If you're running around the map on your own, it feels way too big and too complicated. If you're in a vehicle on the map, it feels too small and it has way too many obstacles. It makes you feel like if you jump into a vehicle, you can't be in it for any longer than 1 minute. This is the same with or without 24 players. You guys remember Star Wars Battlefront 1? Or even Star Wars Battlefront 2, really. Every vehicle in Call of Duty 3 reminds me of when you would play on Indoor in the old Battlefront games, and nobody ever wanted to use a speeder, because whenever you used a speeder, you had to slow down 50,000 times before getting to the other side of Indoor, because there was a million obstacles in your way, and you could never stay on it without just exploding from hitting a tree. It makes the map feel so tiny and filled with obstacles if you use a vehicle, which these maps are trying to accommodate for. Using a speeder was a nightmare on Indoor and Battlefront. Using any vehicles in Call of Duty 3 is a nightmare on any map. It has that effect where you drive from one end to the map of the other in less than 10 seconds, but most likely you won't even make it in those 10 seconds because you'll probably hit something after reverse and get back on track. The class system I brought up earlier, where you could be a medic and revive your teammates, and those changes are interesting enough. It's only interesting because you're playing in a Call of Duty game and you can run around and revive teammates. Riflemen have grenade launchers on their rifles. Scouts can call in artillery strikes. Medics can revive. I don't really know if any one of these classes was OP. It never really felt like it, but it's hard to tell, especially without full matches. The gameplay in the multiplayer was never bad, but one minor thing always weirded me out, and that's that you can sprint in the multiplayer, but you cannot sprint in the campaign. And this is probably due to the fact that they didn't want you rushing through the campaign, or they already knew it was short and didn't want to make it even shorter. But it's just a very strange decision to me that I cannot run in storyline, but I can run in multiplayer. Not a gripe, just odd. It fits in with the stuff I say in the previous video about Sledgehammer games and pretty much all Call of Duty games, and that is that depending on whatever mode you play, multiplayer, zombies, or campaign, you feel like you're playing a game from a completely different developer. It doesn't even have the same mechanics normally as the other parts of the game. These maps, though, are a gripe, and the fact that there's only 10 of them, with pretty much all of them being bad, nothing memorable, nothing distinct, and I honestly prefer the ones without vehicles. There's more focus on the maps without vehicles because they're just focused on making a nice little team deathmatch map, but these are rarely ever chosen in the multiplayer because the main reason why people play the multiplayer is to play Call of Duty 3 because it has vehicles. There's a couple of the maps where I feel like I knew where I was going and I didn't feel like I had a mental illness, but next to Call of Duty Vanguard, this game might have the most forgettable maps in the series for me as well. And it all kind of just adds up that I can't really recommend Call of Duty 3 unless it was $5, and if you have a small group of friends to play with. It's really not terrible, and when you factor in the fact that the game was made in an 8-month development time, it's really impressive that they were able to make this entire game that quickly. It's honestly impressive that the development team could even make a functioning game in 8 months, but it is by far one of the worst Call of Duty games, and just because I say it isn't terrible doesn't mean it's not you know, a bad game. The game is a fucking byproduct of a bunch of developers handed over next-gen technology with no leadership and just making the best with what they had in 8 months. Some may say that the World War II environments will repeat and there won't be that much in variety, because you could even go to my Sledgehammer video and I had the same complaints about Vanguard and Call of Duty World War II. But I will be putting out what makes World at War stand out, and why Call of Duty 2 is not like this as well. Call of Duty 3 was just a sad child born out of greed and Activision trying to force a filler Call of Duty game before 2007, so it means they could keep up with their annual releases. I sound like I'm saying a fucking eulogy right now.
God damn you! Brick is dead!
Look, you remember how I said earlier that Call of Duty 3's developer Richard Farrelly admitted to the 8-month development time? That was an interview when they were talking about World at War. And his point in that interview was not to dunk on Call of Duty 3, but it was to emphasize what they are capable of given the time they need to create a full game and give the audience their full experience. Call of Duty World at War is that game. Hell, even Richard Farrelly in that interview talks about the game apologetic. When talking about Call of Duty 3, he uses quotes like, "We don't want people to forgive Treyarch for what happened." And he's referencing the fact that no company should be on crunch times as little as 8 months. So he's saying, please don't forgive Call of Duty 3. Please don't forgive Treyarch, because we never want to be put underneath a crunch time like that ever again. World at War finally feels like their actual fully fleshed out World War II experience that they probably wish they could have delivered in 2006, but we had to wait until 2008. Treyarch may have put as much effort as possible into Call of Duty 3, but World at War, they did the same thing, but they were actually given the time they needed. Around 2 years to be exact, to make their vision come true. So now, without further ado, we're leaving the Foundation era and entering Treyarch's first game of the Golden Age and their first truly fully developed Call of Duty experience. Before getting into 2008, though, we have to talk about the greatest year, or at least one of the greatest years in video game history, 2007. Modern Warfare, Halo 3, BioShock, Portal, and many others made this one of the greatest years for first-person shooters in particular. Out of all of these fantastic first-person shooters, Modern Warfare won Game of the fucking Year. Modern Warfare, the Call of Duty title, won Game of the fucking Year in 2007 when all of these other first-person shooters came out. So with Treyarch just finishing up Call of Duty 3 and releasing their last non-Call of Duty related game with the infamous James Bond Quantum of Solace game, how are they going to compete with Game of the Year? How are they going to compete with Modern Warfare? Well, they don't try to. And that's the good thing about World at War. Ah, yes, the Golden Age, Modern Warfare to Black Ops 2. I feel that partially why this was the Golden Age for Call of Duty was that everyone was working with that famous IW engine at the time. So both companies were creating new and evolving assets off of each game and sharing them together in a single engine. They were sharing assets and working with that natural evolution to improve off of each other's games. And that leads into my second reason to why I think the Golden Age was so great, and that was the friendly competition that was between Treyarch and Infinity Ward. Treyarch slowly but surely gaining a lot of steam, especially after Call of Duty 3. Them gaining steam in this friendly competition forced Infinity Ward to want to try their damnedest to make sure that they were creating the best possible video game. This is all speculation, though. This was an era where everybody was pretty ecstatic about a new Call of Duty game, and the only exception was really Modern Warfare 3 being considered a disappointment at the time, even though it still garnered critical praise. World at War for me in 2008 just holds a special place in my heart. It's kind of the black sheep of this whole Golden Age period, because it's the only one that doesn't really expand out its story unless you count Reznov from Black Ops 1. It's not a part of the Modern Warfare trilogy, it's not a part of the Black Ops series, really. I mean, it kind of is, but we'll get into that soon. But my favorite quote regarding the creation of World at War comes from Noah Heller, who was a main producer on the game, where one thing that he says in particular struck me when being interviewed. He says, "We do some things in this game that are evolutionary, but when you're following up Game of the Year, it's pretty hard to be revolutionary. And that's the thing. World at War doesn't try to mimic the success of Modern Warfare being Game of the Year because they know that they need to stand on their own 2 feet. They wanted to make a game with gore, one that shows off the horror of World War II unlike previous Call of Duty games, one that bleeds with atmosphere, and even though there's some stuff that's copied using the same engine as Modern Warfare, they still wanted this game to be its own beast. And by God, it is. You remember how I mentioned with Call of Duty 3 that every level feels exactly the same? How I was showing you different clips from the first half of the game and all of them look exactly the same? Well, you've been watching the intros for the first 4 missions of World at War. Every single one of them looks different and feels different. The first mission, you're being interrogated and escape a camp being a POW. The second mission, you're invading a piece of Japanese land. The third mission, you're traveling through the jungle dealing with guerrilla warfare. In the fourth mission, you're now in Nazi Germany sniping with Reznov to kill a Nazi commander. Almost every mission tries to have this variety, and even when you start to get towards the middle of the game, and there's a few missions that start to feel a bit like woods, fields, grassy areas, and that's it. Even these areas aren't made as troublesome as they are in Call of Duty 3 because Call of Duty World at War has a focus. That focus is atmosphere. The most atmospheric Call of Duty game ever, with the only possible competition being Call of Duty 2019 on realism difficulty. The fact it would take 11 years for a game to even come close to World at War's atmosphere really speaks volumes about this 2008 game. Did I mention that the game has this little thing also called split screen in the story mode, where it makes the storyline all the more replayable because you can play through it with a friend? Kind of just, man, who would have thought of that? That's a really good idea. All jokes aside, the split screen is a really fun add-on. It does add some extra replayability if you have somebody in the house, a roommate, a friend, you know, a significant other that you both want to play Call of Duty World at War together. Going back to the previous topic though, because one of my biggest pet peeves is if someone brings up an adjective like atmospheric, then refuses to explain themselves. So I will explain to you why the atmosphere works so well in this game. The music would be a huge plus to the atmosphere, but we will get into that later on in this video when we have a music round. So the first thing I want to discuss about the atmosphere and what makes it work so well is the newly implemented gore system, which has never been in Call of Duty before. This new gore system in the first one in the series does so much for the immersion in the atmosphere, and I will also point out that it's the best gore system that the series has ever seen. To this day still. Call of Duty games have a troublesome time implementing gore and usually just settle for a system that's subpar where you shoot somebody in the face and all of a sudden all of their limbs just explode. I swear to God, dude, in a modern Call of Duty game, I'll run up to somebody and I'll melee them in the freaking toe, and next thing you know, their head is exploding, their neck is exploding, their arms are exploding, their torso is exploding, all because I slapped them in the foot. In World at War, you shoot the ground nearby somebody's legs with a rocket launcher or with a tank blast. Their legs blow off. They're screaming in agony and trying to find the missing legs they just lost a second ago. People's heads, arms, and legs all explode separately due to different types of physical contact, which makes it never feel like someone is just blowing up due to being punched in the arm. It adds that level of immersion and atmosphere that I discussed earlier, allowing people to really feel that they are in this horrible environment only known as war. The game's openings to each mission always starts you in the worst possible situation where you get to experience those terrifying aspects of war, from being interrogated, waking up in a graveyard filled of dying people with Nazis walking around shooting the leftovers. And all of these terrifying intros lead to the triumphant end of overcoming the Nazi regime. The presentation before the mission's intro also has this modern style to it, kind of like Modern Warfare, while somehow also maintaining the historical presentation that old Call of Duty's held sacred. It looks as if a projector is conveying to us historical information surrounding the mission we're about to play, but the modern graphics give it this stylistic feel of like an animated short film. Someone had to go through and hand make all of these presentations, and that is not lazy. That is some damn hard work, and that hard work paid off immensely. Another reason why atmosphere you can tell is better in this game versus other Call of Duty Duties, and you can tell is the vocal point of this game, is the AI. At the time of this game, there was only one enemy AI in the IW engine. The developers of Treyarch specifically went in and altered the AI for Japanese soldiers versus Nazi soldiers, so they could mimic guerrilla warfare and mimic how they were trained versus the way Nazis were trained. This adds a level of immersion that can't even be seen from a modern World War II Call of Duty title like Vanguard, where there is not a massive distinction between the Japanese soldiers and the Nazi soldiers. The last thing I want to say too about the atmosphere is the filter this game has. It's dark, it's dreary, and it's gross. Even when the game is bright, it looks like there's almost this dark cloud over everything, and this is very intentional. You can poke fun at it and call it a nasty filter, but hey, it's World War II, and if the intention is to be gross, then make the filter fucking gross. That's the intention this game wants to give, to show and convey the horror of World War II, how disgusting everything was, how terrifying it is through the intros and the gore system, and trying so hard to get you as immersed as they can possibly make you into a scene. They always show you what can happen to people in war rather than just trying to explain it. The first mission shows a man get his throat cut open right in front of you. The second mission shows a man getting shot in the head and shows his brains as he lays down in the U-boat. And that fourth mission shows that graveyard of dead soldiers created by Nazis. It's atmospheric. That is the focus. The sound design also helps with this. The music helps out greatly with this. And even that main menu music is just ominous. That main menu where it almost looks like you can't see the light of the land through all this war, through all this fog and smoke. You don't know what's beyond that fog in the island. And this main menu music with it, it's just pure horror. This atmosphere is what holds the game up even in the middle of the game where there's a couple of missions that can feel very repetitive. Usually they'll do something though to mix it up for you, like they'll give you a tank mission, a plane mission, a flamethrower mission, which is one of the best in the game, or switching you up from the American to the Soviet campaigns, which is a lot easier to follow in this game because the Americans are fighting the Japanese and the Soviets are fighting the Nazis. They took my advice on doing something that would make the campaigns feel distinct from one another so you can remember what each respective squad is doing. Now, I'm not going to pretend like these characters are anything to write home about. I'm just being honest with you. But there are great voice actors in this game, like Kiefer Sutherland and Gary Oldman even being in the cast, which is crazy because that's Hollywood level talent right there.
I could do it for you.
Do it.
Well, it's sort of like, Dear! On the ledge! Shoot him!
You may brush off these names, but we can all admit that nobody else can voice Reznov except Gary Oldman. He just has a presence to his voice. He does such a great job. Reznov is the only character in this game that has made such a long-lasting impression that they kept the storyline of World at War canon to Black Ops, with the only reoccurring character being Reznov, and then the death of the main character of the Soviet missions. Reznov did for Treyarch what Captain Price did for Infinity Ward. It gave them a mascot, and nowadays you may see that mascot as Frank Woods or Mason, but at the time in 2010, leading up to the release of Black Ops 1, it was Reznov through and through. People loved this man. You might be wondering too, with all the positives I've been saying about this game, like, is there anything I don't like about the campaign? Not really. I could nitpick that there's a few repetitive missions. The veteran difficulty is just bad, especially towards the last half of the game. But the game has so much going on to distract from these minor problems. The problem in general when rating video games as a whole is that you could say, well, you shat on the veteran difficulty in this Sledgehammer game but for being bad, but in this game, you give it a pass? It's never a pass, though. Every video game has core focuses to it. Call of Duty 3's is to tell a realistic, grounded war story, and so is Call of Duty World War II from 2017. Neither succeed at that, so there's nothing holding up the game to rise above its poor traits like repetitive missions or crappy veteran difficulties. World at War's main focus is to tell a diverse war story with an atmosphere that basically bleeds through the screen. They manage that focus, the point of the game, to near perfection, so the minor hiccups don't feel like a pileup of all bad things in the game that are just stockpiling, but rather it feels like a few minor inconveniences that are between you and a perfect game. There's a quote, and I don't know who said it, or if it's always been a thing, or if it hasn't, but the quote is, "You experience art through the way the artist intended, rather than through the way you want it to be." Basically saying, stop with the expectations, don't let that judge a game, but instead judge the game by what it is trying to accomplish. What is the artist's intention? What is the game's focus? Does it accomplish this successfully? And sometimes what it is trying to accomplish can be even up for interpretation. This quote, by the way, will come up again when I talk about Black Ops 1. They changed the AI of the Japanese soldiers just to make the missions feel different. They allowed you to play as the Soviets versus the Nazis, to Americans versus the Japanese, just to add variety. They added a whole new gore system just to add this level of atmosphere that hadn't been seen in a Call of Duty yet, and created one of the Call of Duty's best characters with Reznov. I would say all of that together makes for one of the best Call of Duty games, wouldn't you? World at War made the most terrifying World War II campaign in Call of Duty history, and that is something to be proud of. One of the developers on this game actually said a quote stating that Call of Duty Modern Warfare redefined modern shooters, but we wanted to redefine World War II shooters. And while that is significantly harder to do due to the influx in World War II shooters throughout the 2000s, it doesn't change the fact though that they tried, and in the least they made a unique World War II experience. Craig Houston was the writer on this game, which he was the writer on quite a few Treyarch Call of Duty titles, and Corky Limcall is the game director who also sticks with us for a lot of Treyarch's lifespan. These two individual leaders at Treyarch are actually some of the only Treyarch senior leaders to still be with the company till this very day, with Craig Houston being the main writer on Call of Duty Cold War, and Corky Limcall still being the head game director of Black Ops Cold War as well. Their names are going to come up frequently in this video, but they do receive some backup for writing when it comes up to the Black Ops franchise. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot to mention it. Death cards in the campaign. You can collect them throughout your playthrough and unlock cheat codes for the main story. Think of them as skulls in Halo, which when activated either activates some form of a challenge, like only having knives or grenades you can use for the entire mission, or they activated fun party cheat codes like people's bodies and all their limbs exploding when you would hit a headshot like they naturally do in a modern Call of Duty anyway. World at War also has a ton of Easter eggs, with my personal favorite being that you can get the ray gun on the beach of the second mission. It has co-op mode to be able to replay through the campaign with your friend. I just love this game as a whole. But I'll finish off talking about it by giving an example of what I brought up earlier with succeeding at having such a clear main focus with your game that it can divert my attention away from minor limitations or even possible flaws. World at War's 4th mission is considered one of the best missions in Call of Duty history. You wake up in hell, waiting for a Nazi to notice you alive and just shoot you and end it all. But as you crawl past the dead corpses, you see a corpse slightly start moving and signaling you to stay quiet. He was faking being dead. It's Reznov. He proceeds to whisper to you and tell you his tale on how he's been hunting one single Nazi for 3 days straight. If he's caught, all will be for nothing, and you help him for this entire mission, snipe people until you finally kill the Nazi he has been chasing. Now, if you remember my Sledgehammer retrospective, you would remember that I had a complaint with Advanced Warfare, where if you were spotted in a stealth mission, they insta-failed you, and I hate that. It's a pet peeve of mine. The stealth missions also have the laziest design choices where if you're caught, the mission immediately ends. Well, the same goes for this mission. The pet peeve of insta-failing if you're caught through stealth is still there for me. It still happens in this mission, and that pet peeve doesn't go away. The difference between the two, this mission revolves around killing one guy, and he obviously wouldn't stay in the area if he hears Soviets are killing everybody. That's even less important than what my number one reason is for their big difference. Their big difference is I didn't even think about it during this mission because in this game, Treyarch has focus. It was immersion. It sets up how desperate Reznov is to kill this man. And I didn't even want to be caught, didn't even care to test it that much because I was immersed in his story. I allow myself to be immersed because the game wants me to be immersed. I could be a cynic and just be mad, but this isn't just a small area where if you were caught, the devs could just alter it quickly. This is an entire level, and they would need to reformat the whole level if you were caught. The game wants you to roleplay. It wants you to just throw yourself into this character and listen to Reznov's story. That's what's different from Advanced Warfare. Advanced Warfare would have to reformat one area rather than an entire level to react to you being caught. Advanced Warfare doesn't ask me to roleplay, it just drops me in and says, don't forget to stay quiet, by the way, soldier. It has no subtlety, it has no care for its immersion, and blame the developers for that or Activision, but it fails me if I'm caught, even though it wouldn't really matter if I was caught in that stealth mission. Advanced Warfare doesn't have a focus though, and that's why these minor limitations feel like a stockpile of issues, whereas World at War it becomes an inconvenience to a near perfect campaign. Vendetta isn't even one of my favorite COD missions. It's not even my favorite World at War mission probably, but it is the most engaging. It's the most cinematic mission in all of World at War, especially on a first playthrough with plenty of scripted events happening and scripted obstacles to avoid. It's the perfect mission on your first playthrough. The idea of cinematic scripted missions being perfect on your first playthrough but not being as interesting in future playthroughs is something that cinematic games struggle with, and even though Vendetta is perfect for your first playthrough, it might lose a little bit of its charm upon replays. So now we have stabbed the Soviet flag in and defeated the Nazi army, and shit, I still have notes on this campaign. Yeah, okay, I promise this is the last thing, this is it, and then I gotta move on to multiplayer. But did you know this game had multiple endings? I didn't know that till recently, so I felt it was worth bringing up. It's minor differences, but it was worth it just because I didn't know it, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who don't know that. When playing as Dmitri, you will be given different points where you can decide if you're going to kill surrendering Nazi soldiers or decide not to. If you decide to kill them always, the ending narration of the game will describe you as just another soldier who is merciless. Another ending where if you just spare some of them, he will say he has shown mercy and has shown also brutality. And if you spare all of them, he will describe you as a merciless hero that the Red Army should learn from. It's small things like this with narration changes that make for slightly different endings that Treyarch never had to do, but they did because they put tons of love into this game. Treyarch also did something else that they didn't have to do at all, and that's our cue to talk about the development around Nazi zombies. Nazi zombies. Oh man, you changed everything. Look at that intro. You unlock this mode after completing the main campaign. It was hard to find tons of info about the original Nazi Zombies mode outside of Jason Blundell talking about its creation, noting a few interesting facts. Jason Blundell, by the way, was one of the producers that we talked about earlier that worked in World at War, Call of Duty 3, and he was the lead producer on Zombies titles post Black Ops 2. He was currently a producer and a programmer for World at War and Call of Duty 3, as I stated earlier, but he moved up through the ranks with every Treyarch entry. Before Jason Blundell was the lead producer on Zombies, it was Jimmy Zielinski. He was pretty much the head of Zombies creation from World at War to Black Ops 2. But before Jason, or Jimmy, who we will come back to later, there was one man who we have to thank for almost all the knowledge on how zombies came to be. That's Jesse Snyder Haxington. IGN actually recently wrote a whole new article mentioning this blog post that Jesse made that I will be referring to pretty much for this entire development conversation. Jesse Snyder wrote this long, detailed blog post that I will leave down in the description, by the way, that tells you all the details on how Nazi zombies became a thing. I'm going to briefly sum it up. Treyarch was basically finished on World at War. The multiplayer team was still working on the multiplayer, but the campaign team was done. The campaign team basically wanted an extra mode, kind of like how Modern Warfare had a epilogue mission, the Mile High Club mission. This also fits into the narrative that I speculated on earlier, where both these companies always had friendly competition during the Golden Age that made each game better than the last. Zombies probably would have never existed if this friendly competition between the two main developers didn't exist. But before their eyes were even set on zombies being the concept for the extra mode that would compete with it, they apparently played with the idea of doing a reverse D-Day where you would play as the Nazis mowing down Americans, and you would see how long you could survive until you were inevitably killed by them. Yeah, thank God that didn't make the final cut. But I mention this because this was their inspiration for the round-based horde mode that zombies would become. You would have to inevitably die, just like that German in the bunker who would be shooting at the Americans. That was key. You had to eventually die. One day in the office when they were working on some animations for the campaign, somebody saw the way the Japanese soldiers were walking after being bombed in the second mission, Little Resistance. And the employee said, "Hey, they look like they walk like zombies." Next thing you know, multiple people in the office, from Jimmy Zielinski and Jesse Snyder, they were all working on creating a zombies mode. They took these animations of the Japanese soldiers that were walking around right after being bombed and made them even just slightly more zombie-ish, made the animations, made the audio, and everything behind the back of Activision. Activision did not know about this mode at all. One day, Jason Blundell, being a producer and a programmer on the campaign, was seeing the progress they were making on these zombie animations, seeing the progress they were making on the map in the zombies mode, and he was so impressed by it, but they were all questioning one thing: would Activision approve this? Treyarch needed to figure out a way to make the zombies mode addictive, because that was their key to getting this mode approved. Then one day a light bulb idea flickered into one of their heads to make this game, make this inevitable horde-based death, make it a first-person shooter tower defense game. Make Nazi zombies based off of Balloon's tower defense. Now, I don't literally mean Balloon's tower defense, but stick with me here. In Nazi zombies, you defend an area, you fight off hordes of enemies, you unlock power-ups, you unlock new weapons, you unlock abilities to get stronger and to keep on beating the hordes of enemies until they inevitably beat you. It's a first-person shooter tower defense game. This is how they came up with the idea for the currency system. This is how they came up with the idea for the window system. Came up with the idea of the mystery box, the wall buys, the power-up drop system. Everything was based on the concept of a tower defense game. The idea was eventually developed so much that everyone in the Treyarch office was playing zombies when not working on the actual game, and they were all competing against each other every single day to beat each other's high scores and to beat which round they could get to. It became so addictive that finally, Jason Blundell, these other producers brought in the Activision executives and pleaded for them to give the mode a chance. They basically set them in a room and said, all right, we're going to turn off the lights, just play it, see what you think of it. They came out and they loved it. Their only agreement about Nazi zombies was that players had to unlock it after they beat the campaign, because they were actually so worried that people were going to play zombies instead of the campaign. The rest is history. Jesse Snyder, who wrote this blog, went on to be a lead level designer of Call of Duty Ghosts and to help out with a few other video games. He did not continue work with zombies, but I thank him so much for this in-detail blog post that describes everything you would ever want to know about Noctur Toten's development. Now, did zombies accomplish what they wanted? Yes. Treyarch created a mode so redefining for Call of Duty that it has been replicated, attempted in other Call of Duty games, and has been in nearly every title since. Some people buy Call of Duty just to play zombies. Now let's talk about how good Noct actually is. If you come back to it after playing newer Zombies modes, then you're going to find yourself bored, but that's only because you've been playing the evolved Zombies version of it. It's why I like to play franchises in order of release date, because sometimes you'll play the newest game in a series, and then you go back and you play the older one. It feels outdated, it doesn't have the fancy new stuff, and it feels too minimal, because you're too busy comparing it to the newest one. If you've never played Zombies though, Noct is a great first experience, and Verrückt is a solid one as well, but they only got better because they stopped using the multiplayer maps as their entire map layout. Noct used the multiplayer map Airfield, and Verrückt used the multiplayer map Asylum. These maps don't feel made for zombies, but Shino Numa and Der Riese do. And those were the last 2 DLCs for World at War. Now, I won't talk about these because, as I said, I will not factor paid DLC into my review, but even without any of the DLCs, Noct was a fun and addictive extra mode. You'd put 8 hours into the campaign, a few hours with friends into Zombies, and probably the bulk of your hours into multiplayer. Zombies took World at War from being a 20-hour game and made it a 25 to 30-hour game, and that to me is noteworthy. It's intense, it's extraordinarily influential, and that tower defense addictiveness is present, but is made all the more intense by giving the player that first-person shooter agency to fight off these zombies. Being in first person, your view is more limiting. You can only see what's in front of you, and that with the tower defense horde mode is amazing. And when you think about it from a video game history standpoint, it's probably the game that inspired many horde modes of the 2000s. Think about it like this. Zombies was probably the reason why we started getting all these horde modes in the first place. From Halo's Firefight to Gears of War's horde mode, this all started happening in the 2010s, and that probably sparked from Nazi Zombies. It was simple, but it was simple enough to be a perfect beginning to a long-running video game mode that has had a massive influence on the video game industry. I remember when this came out, and yes, Noct was extremely addictive. If I played Black Ops 2, 3, and 4 though, and then World at War, I would be bored of Noct because of fucking course I would be. Noct or Toten wouldn't have affected my overall rating too much if it was bad, because as it was intended, it was just an extra mode rather than a full piece of this game. But it surpassed all my expectations as an extra mode the year it came out and added quite a bit to my experience. It's only a bad extra mode when you compare it to other iterations of Zombies rather than judging it on its own merits. If you weren't playing split screen co-op though, and you weren't playing split screen Zombies, what were you probably playing with your friends? You were probably playing multiplayer. Gameplay head designer for Call of Duty 3 was David Vonderhaar, and he also worked on the multiplayer. He will stay the lead gameplay guy for Treyarch until his departure, literally just 3 or 4 months ago in August. So that's an easy name to remember because we're going to go over this guy a lot. He has so much to say about all these games. He gives us so much knowledge and insight onto all of their developments. He has been a leader for basically every multiplayer Treyarch has ever done, and he deserves everyone's thanks if you enjoyed any Treyarch multiplayer game. Once again, so that means you know, his name is David Vonderhaar. Another man to thank would be one of the lead programmers and technical lead at Treyarch named David King. We might as well get both Davids out of the way, you know what I'm saying? So with David King, he's been the lead programming engineer at Treyarch from World at War all the way up to Black Ops Cold War. He is one of the longest running leaders as well, and he has done so much for the Treyarch titles. David Vonderhaar doesn't speak much on the multiplayer for World at War, but it is a massive departure from the class-based system that was in Call of Duty 3. They still got vehicles, and some of the maps still have drivable tanks, which can create some insane chaos, but it's not to nearly the level of weirdness that the class-based system was in Call of Duty 3. David Vonderhaar's name will come up again in this video, but David King might not. Just thought he deserved a shout out as well for being an amazing lead programmer. There's only one picture I could find of him. Here it is. Caption of that picture reads, "Another 24-hour shift working on Call of Duty 3. Which I can imagine it was probably like with World at War, with making this multiplayer in just 6 months. I remember reading this somewhere, and I could not find a source to be able to validate it, so I'm not going to say 100% that that's true. It does sound about right, though, considering how much the World at War multiplayer reuses from the Modern Warfare multiplayer in comparison to the campaign or the Zombies mode, where it seems like they modified a lot of the assets with the IW engine. So while I may have heard that that was the case. It might not be true, I'll be entirely honest. I would not quote me on it. It's definitely obvious though that they spent a lot of their remaining time on the multiplayer, because they even cut out massive chunks of the campaign that they were going to create, like a British campaign that they were working on, that actually, when people looked through the files of the game, they were able to find 3 full British missions that were completely cut. Yeah, that's that. So that to me further proves that they were focusing their assets on Nazi zombies towards the end of development and the multiplayer heavily. World at War is just one of the 2 Call of Duty games probably to ever be created where the multiplayer might be the worst part about the game. I want to clarify though, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just feels like a World War II skin over Modern Warfare. The backdrops for a lot of the maps feel somewhat boring, with just like, you know, like on Cliffside, there's ships in the background that just kind of sit there. They don't really shoot or do anything to each other to make like it look like an all-encompassing battleground. And a lot of the maps do feel fairly lazy, but there's some really good standouts. You see Subbase, which is not a great map by any means, but it's a symmetrical map with conceptually really fun submarine that you can run on in the middle of the map. It almost looks like it was designed off of the area in Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they park the sub and Indiana Jones has to disguise himself as a Nazi. There's Castle, Courtyard, Hangar, Cliffside, which I enjoy due to their power positions that people fight over. There's nowhere that feels safe on those maps, and that's what I love about them. There's a constant intensity. The rest of the maps weren't really in the rotation, and they just weren't very memorable. The best maps in World at War by far were the ones that had somewhat openish areas and with power positions that watched over the majority of the map. It meant that if you spawned in, either you were going to have focus on getting one of those power positions, or you were going to be killing a guy who was going after the same power position that you were. There was just always an intensity there, and those are the most chaotic and most fun maps of the game. I also thought about going into more detail about what makes these maps work and what doesn't work about them. Let me know if this is something that you all are interested in seeing in future Call of Duty retrospectives. For now though, I'm not lingering further on World at War, so let's get this game wrapped up because we got plenty more to talk about. The perks are all pretty standard, but there's a couple of broken ones in the mix. Like you have Bazooka with 2 shots as a perk, you have Flamethrower, so like, yeah, you know what I mean. Basically, some perks are just guaranteed to give you free kills. And the weapons, like, yeah, like, we kind of gotta admit that the MP40 was probably one of the most broken guns in Call of Duty history. It killed in 4 shots, and it was basically at any distance. It was just like a death, it was a mini death machine. And I'm not going to pretend that this stuff brings down the multiplayer tons for me. I enjoy multiplayers on the basis of if I had a good time playing them. Like, it's chaotic, it's insanity, and sure, most of it's a ripoff of Modern Warfare with a reskin, but I'm also not going to lie. It's a really fucking cool reskin. Dogs instead of attack helicopters was an awesome idea. The maps were eerie, even if they weren't always the most well thought out. And even with the broken MP40, I still felt like this game was a great time online. I mean, hell, if I'm going to complain about some broken weapons in a Call of Duty game, then every Call of Duty game is going to be crap in my eyes because they almost all have busted weapons. Modern Warfare 2 might be my favorite game in the entire series, but it's got akimbo models, riot shields, noob tubes, and I wouldn't change any of it for anything because it's chaotic and it's fun. World at War is just such a blast to play online. I really had a great time with it, and there is some stuff that's broken. It's not the most well thought out, and it is the worst part about the game, but that doesn't change the fact that I still had a really good time playing it when it was out, and I would still to this day if, you know, there wasn't just hackers everywhere on the game. The only way I'm able to play these games is because I own them. Do not emulate if you do not own a game. We will never suggest that on here. Of course not. Of course not. But if you go online and you know, go on Plutonium, you can also play it through there. And that's a great emulator to be able to play World at War on dedicated servers. There's not that many people on it right now, but it's better than buying World at War on Steam and then not even getting an online code. And even if you manage to get a copy with an online code, you're going to get put into a lobby with a bunch of hackers. You're never going to find an actual lobby with no cheaters. So with that being said, that's the only way I was able to actually play this game through a new set of eyes and be able to play it as an adult online. And even though World at War doesn't have the best multiplayer, it doesn't change the fact that World at War is one of the greatest Call of Duty games ever made. It's what put Treyarch on the map, and to me, it is Treyarch's actual first Call of Duty game. So now with the rising Treyarch, who went from creating their worst Call of Duty game to creating one of the best in just 2 years, were they going to make another World at War game? World at War 2? These were conversations that everyone was having in 2009 on every forum online, and all my friends were talking about it. But alas, no, they were not going to make a sequel. Well, they kind of did. Let's cut to 2010. Before continuing our mission throughout the Golden Age, I ask if you have made it this far to please like, subscribe, comment as well. Well, actually, never mind. Comment after the video's done or whenever, I guess. Just show your support. Join appreciation culture into appreciating every single little piece of art out there. And I'm going to be covering in the future all the Infinity Ward video games as well, and then making one last Call of Duty video ever talking about the state of Call of Duty and Modern Warfare 3, the 2023 one. That will be my last video on Call of Duty before talking about other video games and other films on this channel. So please show your support though. And now we're on to Black Ops 1.
He said it! He said it!
I think one of the most important shifts for Call of Duty that we kind of have to talk about before bringing up Black Ops was in 2009 in the Golden Age, leading up to 2010. And that was the biggest and most drastic shift in tone from Modern Warfare 1 to Modern Warfare 2. This is not necessarily a bad thing, by the way. It was just obvious that after Modern Warfare 1, the direction that Infinity Ward and Treyarch were going in was not telling grounded war stories, but was instead going for a more cinematic feel of them and the attachment people were going to have to their new iconic characters. This led to both games being hell-bent on not being war stories, but instead just making action movie video games. The way the action is handled, the way it's presented is not to emphasize any of the horror of war like World at War or Modern Warfare 1. But instead it's to glorify the game's action heroes or their insanely over-the-top evil villains. We'll get more into this soon, but for now, let's just talk about Black Ops 1 as a game that I didn't like as a kid. I'll explain why and talk about if I still don't like it after talking about the development process of it. You remember how I said that Call of Duty World at War had the full development time needed, which Call of Duty 3 did not? So not only did this game have the full 2 years it needed to be created, but it didn't have a fourth of its 300 employees at Treyarch working on a terrible James Bond game in 2008. This game had all 300 Treyarch employees honed in on one Call of Duty game for 2 years, with a few fresh faces to the leadership crew. Corky Limcol was still the director for Black Ops 1 even after being the director of World at War, but now he was alongside a no-name, Dave Anthony. Dave Anthony helped out with co-writing the entire script of the game with the returning Craig Houston. Dave Anthony also was a head writer on Black Ops 2 with David S. Goyer, who you may know as one of the lead writers of the Zack Snyder movie Man of Steel. And he was also a co-writer on The Dark Knight. David S. Goyer was mostly a story consultant on Black Ops 1, but he was really involved with the creation of the entire story to Black Ops 2. Dave Anthony is an interesting character though, as the new game director and one of the new writers. We'll get more into him when talking about Black Ops 2, but when you look at the Black Ops 1 interviews, all you'll ever find him talking about is story. Not talking about the history of the Vietnam War, the history of the Cold War. They describe these historical events as backdrops for their core story, which is something that's never really been seen in Call of Duty before 2009 with Modern Warfare 2. Modern Warfare 1 did have a story, but still the core focus on the game was showing off how horrific Modern Warfare really is. Modern Warfare 2, though, when we talk about it, has much more of an emphasis on characters, plot twists, and storytelling than Modern Warfare 1. Black Ops does the same thing to World at War, where World at War, the war is front and center. Black Ops, it's a backdrop for the main characters that drive the narrative rather than the actual war driving the narrative. I described Black Ops 1 as an action movie earlier, and I think that's fitting. In the first 10 minutes of the game, you blow up multiple cop cars, you escape in a car chase, you zipline into a Cuban base, and you assassinate fucking Fidel Castro. It is insane. It would be like if World at War opened with you being a paratrooper who was breaking into a Nazi castle Wolfenstein style and then assassinating a head Nazi or Hitler in the first mission. The game would not be focused on how grounded war is then, but instead would just be an action game, and that's okay. When I was a kid though, Picture me here. And don't worry, guys. You guys got my permission to imagine me as a minor, okay? Imagine playing this game like me when I was a kid, knowing that Gary Oldman was coming back as Reznov from World at War. So you're thinking this could be some type of World at War sequel. And then the game opens up with an absolute 80s action movie chaos in a bar. I grew up playing Modern Warfare a lot and not really enjoying the Black Ops storyline. I didn't like how restrictive it all felt, and I know you might tilt your head to that and be confused, but let's come full circle in explaining what I mean by restrictive. Coming full circle, you remember how I said earlier that the Vendetta mission from World at War is the perfect first playthrough mission? It's because so much of it is scripted that when you replay through it so many times, it loses its charm, and you might even start to see through the cracks. To me, that is the entirety of Black Ops 1's campaign. When I was a kid, I used to play all gillied up on Modern Warfare all the time. And you want to know why? It's because if I screwed up, the enemies would still attack me, and Captain Price would call me an idiot, but the mission would continue. If I screwed up and was spotted by the helicopter when leaving the church, the helicopter would actually turn back around and chase me inside the church. And then if I hid in the church, it would just blow up the roof and try and kill me still. And then the game gives you the ability to use rocket launchers so you can destroy the helicopter if you want to. This game gives you so much replayability with stuff like this that gives you a certain amount of agency that you don't feel in Black Ops 1. And even when you destroy the helicopter, Captain Price actually says to you,
Alright, now you're just showing off. Let's go.
Black Ops 1, though, has the perfect one-time campaign playthrough for me. But when I'd replay it growing up, I'd try different stuff like, oh, let me help out these guys kill the guards on Vorkuta. But sometimes you can't even kill the guards if it's scripted. And then other times you would kill the guards, but then the prisoner just dies with them, even though you just saved the prisoner? Like their body just goes limp because you shot the guard? Another example is when you're behind the coal cart in Vorkuta. Reznov says stay behind the cart, but yet the developers have all these obstacles all around you that you could take cover from the turret that's firing at you without having to be behind the coal cart. So you don't actually have to be behind the cart. You could just go behind this wall over here. You could go behind that pillar over there. That's what they want you to think. Because I'd be replaying the game and you jump behind cover to the side and the enemy just shoots right through the cover. They literally are no clipping through the environment with their bullets. There's a sneaking mission towards the end of the game where you're with Reznov and you have to stay in the dark, don't go into the light. And if you're caught, they'll send 100 troops after you, and that's all okay because I could try fighting them off. Nope. The game disables. The game went out of their way to disable picking up any guns in this part of the mission. So if you get caught, 100 troops come up to you, and then you can't, if you kill one of them with your knife, you can't even pick up their gun. You can't do it because they specifically disabled it. This game constantly, and I mean constantly, exercises this thing that I'm going to refer to as purposeful restrictions. Sometimes you have to restrict stuff, like borders on a map, or during a scripted event, you have to restrict stuff for the player. This game, though, wants you to play it exactly the way they want you to, and if you play it even remotely off, you fail. Some of the missions, it's not even noticeable because you're just running down hallways and shooting people, but many of the beginning missions and many of the ending missions have so many scripted events that it's extremely noticeable. Walking slightly away from your teammates, oh, it's an auto fail. Have you ever had to do the part where the Juggernaut comes through the garage door on veteran difficulty on Vorkuta, or even hardened difficulty? You may be thinking because he sprints towards you, oh shit, I'm gonna lure him back to the previous room and then I'm gonna fight him in there because he's charging me. Oh wait, you can't go back to the previous room because the game will just insta-fail you. Instead, the game wants to force you to pick up an AK-47 in the previous room that has an attached grenade launcher to it to be able to fight against him, and there's really no other way to kill him on veteran mode. You could pray to the RNG gods, but I don't think that that should be the case, and I don't think the case should be that I have to pick up a very specific fallen weapon in the previous room that I'm not going to be able to go back to 10 seconds later without failing the mission. Now, when I was a kid, all of this bothered me. Does it bother me as an adult? Yes, but I also don't care nearly as much. Black Ops to me is a time capsule game for Call of Duty entering the cinematic stage of gaming in the late 2000s and early 2010s. This was an era of games where everything was trying to be movie-like. And the same goes for Call of Duty. I think at the time I didn't like it because games were trying to be more like movies, and that just didn't interest me. Since that's not nearly as much of a trend anymore, I can just play Black Ops as more of a time capsule of Call of Duty entering the cinematic trend of gaming, rather than it being the destruction of gaming or destroying my experience or whatever I was thinking at the time. Because Black Ops 1's entire foundation rides on being an action film. They took all their notes from Vendetta that I said earlier, and they boiled it down to, okay guys, let's just make an entire campaign of just narrow corridor shootouts and really kick-ass environments and have a scripted event every 10 seconds. Now I will say, that's not replayable. And that gets rid of a lot of the amazing open area shootouts that Call of Duty is known for before 2010. But no matter how much I complain that it's not replayable, that you're restricted to do it in the most meticulous way that the developers want you to, and that they even restrict stuff on purpose, like letting enemies no-clip shoot you through obstacles, or forcing you to not be allowed to pick up a gun, the one thing I can admit through all of this bitching, it makes for possibly the best campaign in the series for just one playthrough. Like Vendetta, it's probably the best mission in the entire game if you've only played the game once or twice. Black Ops campaign is probably the best campaign in the series if you've only played it once or twice. Treyarch's emphasis and focus for the video game, as they exemplify in all their interviews, was on narrative and story. They wanted to make iconic characters. They wanted to make an iconic story. And fuck, man. This story, regardless of all the nitpicking you could do, is one of the best in the series. Craig Houston and Dave Anthony and Corky Lemcall, you knocked it out of the park. Everything from the starting dialogue with the "Where's Reznov?" that Mason utters while in the CIA chamber, the badass plot twist, and finally the very rushed but ultimately charming ending. I swear to God, you kill Dragovich at the end of the game, and then within 1 minute they say, "We did it, Mason. We won," while fighter jets are just celebrating and flying over you and American flags are just covered on your screen. It's so oddly rushed.
It's over. We won. For now.
But like I said, it's charming. Believe it or not, though, adults when we were kids playing Black Ops 1 thought this campaign was brutally linear. There's reviews complaining about this when the game first came out. But this can still annoy me without being the point of the game. This game doesn't have a good campaign because it's replayable, has massive battles, or has a great atmosphere. It has a good campaign because its focus, as we mentioned with World at War's being atmosphere, Black Ops' focus is on creating well-crafted characters, having an interesting backdrop with the Cold War, and creating an extremely restrictive but engaging narrative. If you threw any other story or poorly written characters in the place of Black Ops' narrative, it would fall flat on its face. It would fail miserably on all levels because that is the core of it. By us accepting that it would fall flat on its face if the characters were poorly written or if the story wasn't good, that just exemplifies how engaging it is, that just like Vendetta from World at War, it can help distract us from all the limitations that surround you in the game. I kind of just went on a rant, but it's very relieving though, because it's basically me just finally explaining my 13-year grudge against Black Ops while also explaining my love for the game. It is a great campaign though, especially if it's your first time playing it, and I don't think that should be understated. I mean, hell dude, most people don't even play Call of Duty campaigns more than one time. Most people don't even play them at all. It's basically an indirect sequel to World at War, and I love that. We'll come back around to this indirect sequel thing when we talk about Black Ops 2, by the way. There's lots of really cool stuff here though, like you recount all of your memories to your interrogator, foreshadowing events like telling him, why don't you interrogate Hudson? But your interrogator actually is Hudson. It's clever, and it all leads to the classic plot twist scene where he says,
My name is Victor Reznov. And I will have my revenge.
It really is one of the best moments in games from 2010. There's a lot of goofy stuff in the story as well. You'll be laughing along with it when all of a sudden Frank Woods throws you a crossbow and is like, explosive tip rounds, by the way. Or when you pick up a minigun and have to shoot your way out of a prison. It's absolutely bonkers, and the game knows it, which I respect. It takes its characters seriously, but it takes them seriously in the same way that an 80s action movie takes Arnold Schwarzenegger seriously.
Stick around.
It maintains the balance between having internal conflict while creating a super over-the-top action hero badass stereotype. And it does it to near perfection. Speaking of things that have also been done to near perfection, the original Treyarch artist who did World at War also came back. His name is Cullen Whitney, and he did a fantastic job at realizing that he didn't need the dreary color palette of World at War. Instead, he opted for a more colorful action movie mise-en-scène, and I can't imagine it any other way. This game would feel so out of place if it was like a super dark, gross, war-ridden color palette. It would just feel so weird. I'm not going to talk much more about the campaign. It's really great, but my personal favorite mission is that slight direct sequel part with World at War with the Nova 6 gas mission. You can use old World War II guns, play as Reznov, and you see the main character from World at War get betrayed and killed. Overall, this is my favorite mission. You can call it nostalgia. I don't care. It's a blast. There's a great quote about the payback mission from the community manager at Treyarch, where he was talking about how they were going to do the helicopter controls when you hijacked a helicopter in Black Ops 1. The community manager, I believe his name is Josh Olin, said the helicopter mission, when being developed, they were trying to decide if they were going to allow lots of controls for the helicopter, and ultimately they decided no. You have to be able to hop into this helicopter and just know how to fly it. It has to be that simple. And this is how I feel about how so much of the Black Ops campaign presents itself. No complexity, no agency, but simple. And if there's one thing that comes from that simplicity, they showed it off at the E3 demo in 2010 when they showed off footage of you hijacking that helicopter, and it was that it's the most badass looking thing I've ever seen, and it wouldn't have been the case if it was complicated.
You see the hind? We're gonna take it.
Therefore, if you play Black Ops 1 exactly the way the developers want, and you don't try to have any agency, just immerse yourself and it will look just as badass as the demo did when they showed it off in 2010. This storyline is one of the main reasons people play Call of Duty campaigns still, and it has continued through Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, kinda Black Ops 4, and Black Ops Cold War. It captured an entire generation and has held on to them through these characters like Alex Mason and Frank Woods or Reznov. Through the assassination of Fidel Castro, to the WMD mission, to Payback, and to the final mission Revelations, Black Ops 1 is an action movie treat through and through, and I cannot complain my way out of it. So now, what about multiplayer? Well, multiplayer just won't back down from the plate either, because it's one of the best this series has ever seen. David Vonderhaar is back again as the lead designer for gameplay. This time, David talks about all the new features being implemented into multiplayer, customization of characters depending on the loadout features, like if you have the perk flak jacket, then your character will literally wear a flak jacket, which that's awesome. He talks about how this is the first Call of Duty game to have environmental changes, such as on radiation, you can open up the sealed door that's in the middle of the map. There's also equipment now. On top of your lethal grenades and your tactical grenades, you can also have equipment which can be claymores or spy cameras or whatever you want. This already, from what I'm saying, all sounds like a ton of changes, but we didn't even get to the biggest one in multiplayer, and that's wager matches. The way they worked was that you unlocked items based on a credit system in the game. That's how the progression system worked. It was a credit system. But if you did these wager matches, then you could gamble your credits, and if you won, you'd basically double your credits. These have never been back in Call of Duty, and honestly, it's just sad. The modes Gun Game, Sticks and Stones, and One in the Chamber have been back at one point or another. The problem is that Call of Duty doesn't base itself off of a credit system anymore, so there's no intensity to any of these matches. The whole point of a wager match was that you were wagering something, and you knew if you lost, then you'd lose your credits, and that was exhilarating. So therefore, you had all these sweaty kids in a lobby playing gun game or one in the chamber, and it was a blast. Instead of bringing back wager matches, Activision just opted to give us real gambling with loot boxes. Yeah, great listening to the community over there. Now, David Vonderhart told us about all the new design choices for the multiplayer, but what about the maps? Arguably the most important part about the multiplayer. Well, there were 14 at launch, and it had some of the best maps in the series. You have Firing Range, Array, Cracked, Summit, Nuketown, Jungle. Need I say more? Sure, there was a couple of misfires every now and then, and it's sad to hear David talk about the maps because he seems most excited for people to try the maps that were less 3-lane focused, less of the stereotypical COD map. He gets the most excited for maps like Radiation or Cracked, whereas most people just get excited for Firing Range or Summit. Usually 90% of Call of Duty maps are the same in terms of map philosophy, but the maps themselves stand out to people the most when they have a sense of uniqueness to their environment, or they just have this balls out insane mentality to them, like Rust or Shipment from Modern Warfare. Terminal is loved because it's a well-made 3-lane map that follows the standard Call of Duty trope, but it's also loved because it's a fucking airport and you can run through an airplane. It's cool. It's an awesome design for a map. So Black Ops 1 maps are not trying to reinvent the wheel, or at least the ones that are really popular. They remain the same as many other Call of Duty maps. They have unique artistic choices though, and they have some environmental interactivity, which is a brand new thing for the Call of Duty series. The maps had a diversity to them that where if you even showed me one single frame of one of these maps, I could probably tell you which map it is. That is the definition of memorable. That's well designed on an artistic level, and that's just one reason why I feel that this game has some of the best maps in the series. You could show me a corner on Cracked and it would show debris and I'd be like, oh, that's Cracked. You show me a laboratory, oh, that's Summit. You show me a corner in some nice 50s kitchen diner, oh, that's Nuketown. They're instantly recognizable because they all have their own looks, which is something that I can't even say about World at War's maps or many other modern Call of Duty games. Most just reuse assets from other maps or from the campaign, and it just makes all the maps bundle up into one artistic design that does not look unique to the respective map. One of the last things we'll get to with the multiplayer is going to be the balancing. Black Ops 1 is balanced well enough. It took the approach of Modern Warfare 2 had, where there's just a few weapons that people are actually going to use, and they added 1,000 overpowered kill streaks so everyone was overpowered. These games, specifically Modern Warfare 1, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, and Black Ops 4, had probably the most consistent quality assurance when it came to balance in the multiplayer. Like if you were going to play a Call of Duty competitively, like if you were just some like esports crackhead, you were probably playing one of these games. And that shows through their sales figures as well. Black Ops 1 sold 31 million copies and is the highest selling Call of Duty game ever. Everyone was playing this game. I'm not surprised. The last thing for the multiplayer to give just a notable mention to was also that this was the first Call of Duty game to add a theater mode like what Halo 3 had at the time. You could rewatch your matches from any angle and record clips of what happened during them. This was also accompanied by a bots mode where it was the first Call of Duty game ever to have bots. You can play any map in the game with bots that you could set for any difficulty from recruit to veteran. Nothing crazy here. There was no like big, bunch of game changes or anything like that. But this just goes to show how dedicated Treyarch were to delivering a game that was so jam-packed full of not only new modes to play, but also was dedicated to always giving you a Call of Duty with more than any previous Call of Duty game. And they will show this again in a couple of their next entries. But speaking of one-upping the previous game with more quantity, let's talk about zombies. When you clicked on the zombies mode, the entire main menu changed. Instead of Hudson questioning you in the main menu, now he was a zombie slamming his hands up against the window. All the television showed different footage than before. And before continuing, by the way, I just want to give credit to this main menu by saying that this is one of the greatest main menus that has ever been put in a video game. Whoever came up with this idea of escaping your chair and walking around the room you're trapped in, making the main menu on the TV screen in front of you when you're sitting down chained to the chair, and changing it all up whenever you click on zombies, I cannot figure out who was responsible for these ideas, but you're amazing. Hudson will even ask you questions while you sit in the chair on the main menu, and the questions are reflective of where you're at in the campaign. Call of Duty main menus and UIs have gone to shit in recent years, and it's nice to see a game that has so much confidence and takes its main menu as an opportunity to add that next step in the immersion process, so the moment I boot up the game, I'm immediately in Black Ops mode, rather than navigating through a fucking social media page to find the single player button. They always say that the best UIs is the one you don't notice. Whenever I see the Black Ops main menu, I'm never frustrated. I can always find everything just fine, and it's so immersive that the only thing on my mind is, it's Black Ops time. Anyway, now that that's done with, back to zombies. This game came with 3 zombies maps in the base game: Kino der Toten, 5, and Dead Ops Arcade. It has my personal favorite base game zombies in the series, and if you include all the DLC, it's my favorite zombies experience in the entire series. You remember how much Jesse Snyder helped us out with his blog post on World at War zombies? Well, now we are guided by the next leader for zombies, and that man is Jimmy Zielinski. Jimmy Zielinski basically led zombies from World at War to Black Ops 2, with his last map ever being produced being Buried, which was a DLC map for Black Ops 2. After that, he was replaced by Jason Blundell, who we discussed earlier as a producer on Call of Duty since Call of Duty 3. Jimmy Zielinski, though, was trying to continue one-upping his previous iteration of zombies from World at War, so now he was adding things like zombie bosses with the Pentagon Thief on 5, Easter egg storylines that were kind of in the background a lot of the time, but sometimes made it to the foreground, and adding new weapons and new perks to spice things up. Kino der Toten is the first of these maps, and it is easily one of the greatest zombie maps ever made, with this dead-looking Nazi movie theater and teleporters that will teleport you to a Pack-a-Punch room. It's massive, but not complicated. It's a perfect zombies map. 5 is the opposite of Kino, where it feels extremely cramped and narrow, which I normally don't mind because it's intense, but I like to be able to at least maneuver around the zombies like in Kino der Toten, which 5 barely allows you to do. It's actually really poorly done, some of the hallways where you can't really even get around the zombies if they come after you. That's my biggest complaint on 5, because it is a great idea to be able to play as JFK, Castro, and all these leaders together in a room. Like, it's really fun to play as those characters.
Our humble troops. Do not pray for easy lives, my friends. Pray to be stronger men.
The map is just so narrow, and it's difficult to get around zombies constantly. You really feel like, unless you're playing with 4 people, you're probably not going to make a lot of progress on this map. It's extremely cramped and very hard to navigate. Now, I want to be clear. I am somewhat breezing through the zombies, because if I talk about every new perk, every new gun, and all the pros and cons, then we'll be focused on Black Ops 1 for another hour. We still have 4 games left to cover, so I'm just going to point out that the zombies in this game is my favorite in the series. If you have all the DLCs, it allows you to play the original World at War maps, but it doesn't really update them with the newer stuff that Black Ops 3 does, which I prefer because I like to play the authentic experience. But you also get Moon, which apparently was originally going to be a Paris map, which I had no idea about. There's also Shangri-La, which is by far the worst map in Black Ops 1, but it does have an amazing aesthetic. Ascension, which is probably my favorite zombies map in the series, and Call of the Dead, which, oh man, come on. It's got Freddy Krueger actor Robert Englund. You can't hate this. Going back to the actual base game, though, 5 replaces Hellhounds with these gas zombies who fart in your face if you get too close to them. They're annoying, and they make the already cramped areas almost impossible to occupy, because now you're getting gassed and farted on down the narrow hallway, so you can't even get around zombies even if you wanted to, because they spawn a fart field around them. I don't really like open maps for zombies, but Kino is massive in terms of like the theater and in terms of the starting area, but there's hallways and transition areas in between these areas that are a lot smaller that add to the intensity, and you can still maneuver around zombies. It's not like, extremely cramped. It's one of those massive maps that knows how to limit the massive areas to specific parts of the map. Also, like, when I say massive maps, like, the ones later on after Black Ops 1 make Kino der Toten look small. So I'm saying massive in terms of Black Ops 1. I'm not saying massive in terms of, you know, Black Ops Cold War or Vanguard or whatever. The areas on Kino are big enough to occupy the player and lots of zombies while giving some leeway to jump around zombies, and then still having hallways that you can easily get screwed over in if you're not careful. I want to slightly give a mention to the zombie storyline because I know that's very important to some people, but I don't really keep up with it. I do know that when discussing it, Jason Blundell and Jimmy have commented that it's all fan sourced. So they would basically just read fan theories online and then commit to doing whatever those fan theories were in the next map, and then leaving some more breadcrumbs to see what the fans come up with next. Jason Blundell seems a little bit more like original in his philosophy. He doesn't really listen to fans, I don't think, as much. I could be wrong about this. He was the creator of what was called the Chaos storyline seen in Black Ops 3, or the Dark Ether storyline that's in Cold War, which don't follow the philosophy of fan-sourced material. I don't think, at least. I do not quote me on that.
I don't understand a thing in this game, bro. This game has done nothing but just confuse me, bro. You know what I'm saying? I just don't understand what's going on.
I never kept up with this stuff in the first place, but the one thing I can point out, and it's another reason why I love Black Ops 1 and why it has my favorite zombies, and that is it strikes the perfect balance between the Easter egg stuff and then being able to just be a player who's just trying to survive and not do them. If you enjoy this balance of not really being able to do the Easter eggs and you can still have fun, or you can do the Easter eggs and that's just something extra you can feel like doing, then you're probably going to like Jimmy Zielinski more than Jason Blundell as a lead creative control behind zombies, because Jason Blundell loves the more cryptic storytelling with the massive Easter eggs that are involved in every facet of the zombies map, kind of like Origins or Shadows of Evil. It's amazing to me that Black Ops 4 seemed like it was such a treat to have 3 zombies maps at launch because of no campaign, when literally Black Ops 1 had 3 modes in zombies, which we still haven't even talked about the last one. There was 2 maps, and then there was Dead Ops Arcade, which was their attempt at making an entire new extra mode once again with a new top-down arcade way of playing zombies. It's engaging, it's harmless, it's addictive, and I get why people like it. I'm not going to pretend like Black Ops 1 wouldn't be the best game in the series if it wasn't for Dead Ops Arcade, or if it was bad and it would have just brought the game down so much. And I'm not going to pretend it really elevated the presence of Black Ops 1. Basically, what I'm saying is that nobody bought Black Ops 1 for Dead Ops Arcade. It's a fun extra mode that you can kill an hour or two in. It reminds me of the way Nazi Zombies was originally in the base game for World at War. You wonder why Black Ops 1 was the highest selling Call of Duty game ever, or why everyone latched onto it? It's a question that I used to ask myself as a kid, but it was a question I asked myself while writing this too. And now I'm self-reflecting, currently while writing this, on what that answer to the question would be. It was everything. It started with the hype surrounding the demo.
You see the Hind? We're gonna take it.
The Won't Back Down trailer. And it worked for everyone, especially those who didn't care for the modern warfare setting. It worked for new gamers who didn't play Call of Duty, who were looking for a cinematic experience like the series Uncharted. They had a first-person shooter that was embracing those 2010 gaming tropes with a massive budget. It was a game that not only worked for newcomers, but it worked for people like me at the time who wanted a World at War sequel with the return of Reznov and the indirect tie-up to that storyline. It worked so well just due to how simple it was to just get it. And that was for better and for worse, due to the hand-holding or scripted events, which feels like 10 times more than the average Call of Duty campaign. But even with all the caveats and some of the problems I have had with it ever since I was a kid, and all of its minor inconveniences to an otherwise perfect experience, Black Ops 1 truly is one of the greatest Call of Duty games ever. And thus, the Modern Warfare 2 crackhead child in me has completed his anime arc at the age of 25 years old. And what better way to celebrate my completed arc than to talk about not one of the greatest Call of Duty games ever, but possibly the greatest Call of Duty game ever.
Don't leave me.
Black Ops 2. The burning Josefina asking Raul Menendez to not leave her while the choir sings. This sounds so cheesy, but more than any other Call of Duty before it, it feels like Black Ops 2 wants to say something through its villain. When General Shepard was a warmonger, that was the personification of what happens when you let your patriotism take over your rational thinking. Raul Menendez is way more personal than that. Raul Menendez is a broken shell of a man who will do anything to have vengeance on a country that has taken everything from him. The pivot to the future that they did is hard for me to find reasoning for. There was leaks about it before the announcement trailer for Black Ops 2, but I assume it was just due to Treyarch continuously wanting to try new features in their games and to always challenge themselves. They were always trying to separate themselves from the competition of Infinity Ward. So doing, World War II, then the Cold War, and then the future, kind of lines up for just the way they like to do things. It's just interesting though that Call of Duty being futuristic tends to be equated to copying games like Titanfall with wall running and advanced movement in the later games, but Black Ops 2 doesn't care about any of that. It came out before Titanfall. The writers, who were all the same from Black Ops 1, just wanted to write a story about what possible future warfare would look like. They even went on to talk to military advisors about their script to see if this was all plausible in 2025, and most of the advisors told them that the ideas they had already basically existed, and that they should just keep on going farther and farther with it. But let's talk about one of the people that we brought up earlier that I wanted to go into more with Black Ops 2, Dave Anthony. Dave Anthony grew up in an area of poverty before becoming a video game tester. He would then go on to write video games for companies just for free, just to be able to have something to throw on his resume. He quit Treyarch by Black Ops 3 because of the grueling hours, and he talked about how much time he was being taken away from his family to be able to work on one of these video games. So eventually he left it all and he went home. But because of how accurate his storyline was for futuristic warfare in Black Ops 2, he actually got a job offer later on to join a think tank called the Atlantic Council. This is a think tank political group who works with countries on solving geopolitical issues. And I'd like to clarify that I really don't agree on anything that Dave Anthony says or his opinions on stuff that sound eerily similar to a dystopian future where we need to stop crime or terrorist attacks before they ever even happen. But his vision of future warfare where technology takes away human rights, where the use of technology violates your rights, and wanting to figure out the line between these uncomfortable future topics like drone warfare and robotics was a key to the success in the writing of Black Ops 2. Raul Menendez's sister was burned alive and left disfigured from an American businessman who set their barn on fire in an insurance fraud scheme. Raul Menendez grows older and cares for his sister. Menendez and his dad both run a drug ring that both Woods and the CIA are trying to be responsible for busting. This is in the 80s. Woods and his team are captured and tortured, and Menendez leaves Woods for dead. Frank Woods is saved by Alex Mason, and the platoon and the squad are now back together to try and capture Raul Menendez in hopes to gain intel on the geopolitical affairs of the Soviets during the Cold War. And there's also a new rising international China-based organization. Frank Woods has no interest in capturing Menendez though. He just wants revenge for being left to die. And through trying to kill Menendez, he actually throws a grenade and accidentally kills Menendez's disfigured sister. Menendez now fakes his death in this same grenade blast that kills his sister, and he creates an underground militant populist group known as Cortes Dia. The idea of creating a grassroots populist group using social media and modern tech really isn't that far-fetched. I mean, it happens all the time in modern society, so this is actually great stuff for a script in 2012. Raul Menendez eventually reveals himself, and Cortes Dia over the last 20 years has been gaining over 2 billion people following it that are wanting to fight back against the top 1%, fight back against the rich, and fight back against countries who have been stealing people's rights with technology and allowing the impoverished to go unnoticed. With this many people working with Cortes Dia run by Raul Menendez, he can now have people on the inside of the CIA and the inside of both the international organizations of the USA and China. He's able to hack their technology for both international organizations in the future and cause them to destroy their own cities. It also could be Cordis Die. If I've been mispronouncing it, literally just correct me, please. Now, you may be wondering why I just said the entire plot of Black Ops 2 to you. Well, because it's honestly really amazing. It takes concepts like revenge with Frank Woods and shows off the curse of revenge leads to nothing good. Frank Woods accidentally kills Mason at one point in the story when just following orders because he's thinking he's getting revenge on Raul Menendez. He thinks that he's doing his job. And Raul Menendez represents people who have just been pushed down their whole lives by the superpowered nations that surround us. And it's just a great idea for a villain because it makes him understandable and it makes him sympathetic. He is psychologically tormented by this, but will not let his revenge be narrow-sighted like Frank Woods did when he accidentally shot Mason. What do the writers do with Frank Woods in the future, by the way? They turn him into a fucking old loon. The indirect and direct sequel storytelling works so well here because we get the badass, crazy Frank Woods in the past, but we also see the moment that broke him when he killed his best friend and turned him into a shell of a man who lives in a retirement home in the future. It critiques our action heroes from Black Ops 1 by having this man realize the dumb mistakes he made in the past and try to get David, Alex Mason's son, to not repeat those same mistakes. This game is all about learning from these action heroes like Frank Woods that are so badass, but they're ultimately flawed individuals who react rather than think and represent a country that has pushed Raul Menendez down so far and the other 2 billion people that are siding with Cordis Dia. Raul Menendez alone has so many layers psychologically against the technology of the world, the imperialism, America as a whole, and then trying to commit to revenge for his sister who died. Real leaders are built off of mentalities like this. The player's actions throughout the story will determine what the ending is going to be and what's going to happen to the main character. But if you decide to get revenge on Raul Menendez as David Mason, you are basically guaranteeing the ending where Raul Menendez wins. But with the multiple endings that you can end up with, this just fits in with the developer progression off the last game that continues. Because if you remember my biggest complaint about Black Ops 1, it was the linearity of it all, the restrictiveness. All of this is just out the window in Black Ops 2. They managed to balance to near perfection with giving the player the agency they desire while still having some incredible scripted action sequences. There's optional side missions you can do called Strike Force missions that combine real-time strategy with first-person shooter gameplay where you can become any character in the mission, and if you win these, you are more likely to get the best ending in the game. They're just overall great missions. Even if on Veteran they're obnoxious as hell and basically impossible, they're great missions outside of that. There's also optional side activities in every mission where you could pick up a sword and kill 10 enemies with a sword, and that's an objective. Or plant armed bear traps for when enemies step in them, they'll explode. That's an optional objective. It gives the game that replayability I mentioned that was lacking so much in Black Ops 1's campaign. It's like they listened to every tiny pet peeve I had and then threw them all out the window and said, nah, dude, we could do this different. This game is just, it has the perfect villain. It has the perfect characters, amazing action set pieces, and still manages to have the film level quality writing and storytelling that spans over 40 years of warfare, giving you all the variety you could want. It's like Black Ops 2 was just the perfect whirlwind of effects, with David Vonderhaar being in charge of the gameplay still and having a blast making this futuristic technology. And then the writers Craig Houston again, Dave Anthony again, and now the Hollywood writer David S. Goyer in the writer's room, and that they just really all cared about these characters. Hollywood talented actors now coming back into their roles again, who with motion capture were now more comfortable with their roles from Black Ops 1 in Black Ops 2, with Sam Worthington, Michael Keaton, and James C. Burns, who, by the way, knocks it out of the park as old Frank Woods. This video has been too positive. We've been positive for World at War, we've been positive for Black Ops 1, we've been positive for Black Ops 2. We've got to bring some negativity into the mix. We got to. I can't do this anymore. Too much positivity in my life. So we're going to be cutting off the positivity here. We're going to talk about Jimmy's last few zombies maps and talk about zombies in general for Black Ops 2 first. That's gonna mix things up a little bit. I feel that Jimmy Zielinski is my favorite zombies lead developer. He was constantly trying to one-up himself. Transit was a bust though, and it all starts with what you're seeing in his vision of where zombies should be going. He was in full control of where the zombies mode is going to be taken, with pressure from the fans to create even a full-blown zombies Call of Duty standalone title. That was actually a major request of fans in the late 2000s. People, and even in 2010s, oh my gosh, like everyone wanted to see a massive full-blown Call of Duty Zombies game, and I'm sure they've talked about it behind the scenes. Jimmy knew the fans wanted a full game of zombies, and that's exactly what Transit tries to deliver on. You go from the small zombies maps to the small zombies maps using a bus to transport you around an entire city. It's an attempt to make zombies feel open world without having to make it open world, like they did later with Outbreak in Black Ops Cold War. The problem with Black Ops 2 Zombies, though, lies with two things in particular, and before I even say these things, I would like to point out one thing I have massive respect on with Jimmy. My boy, Jimmy. Jimmy never wanted zombies to be easy, and I respect that greatly. No zombies map ever made by Jimmy was easy. It would normally get at least slightly difficult, even in the early rounds, like rounds 5 through 8, which is impressive when later zombie games that included gobblegums feel like you're basically hacking the game or using cheat codes to make surviving easy. The armor modes in the later games, the slower zombies, the overpowered abilities, and it just all accumulates to make zombies feel too easy to a pro gamer like me. The problem with Transit, though, is that if you ever, and I mean ever, miss the bus, you're pretty much screwed and you just have to wait. Wait a long time. Also, the bus rides in general are just not fun. There's nothing to do besides stand and shoot out windows or piss off the bus driver if you're funny. I feel like a lot of this could have just been fixed by letting me have a map where I could select what destination I wanted the bus to transport me to, rather than having to go one at a time and then have to wait forever for it to come back around. Which, that's the other issue. Every location should have a button that's like, oh, hey, you're calling the bus. It's going to take 1 minute for it to get there, rather than having to wait for it to go all around the entire map all over again. The bus rides weren't fun. The bus concept in general was just poorly executed. And if you lost or missed it, it would be hard to survive in the one area, and on top of that, it would just take forever to come back around. The beginning of Transit feels like a rat race to get everything finished, from the parts to craft the turbine to unlocking everything possible on the map before you can finally just relax and survive. Transit has the problem that many of the worst zombies maps have. I'm not even focused on surviving against the actual zombies. I just want to do this chore list of things before I can do the main objective of the mode, which is actually killing zombies. It's just too convoluted. It is. And it's not something you're naturally going to come across while you're just playing the game. It's something you're probably just going to look up online because it's kind of too confusing. The point I'm trying to make is that you would never do any of this while just surviving. You would use the teleporters, you would use the shuttles, you would use the electricity, you would use the mystery box, you would find all this stuff naturally. And ultimately, everything in Transit asks you to do stuff that sounds too convoluted compared to these things. And it's not stuff that would just naturally happen while progressing through the map. I want all the abilities and the extra stuff to just unlock naturally for me while I'm playing the game, with my focus being purely on survival. There's big divides in the zombies community about how these maps are made, and if the focus should be on Easter eggs or if the focus should be on the simplicity. And that's fine. We all got preferences, and I'm just a minimalist at heart. I love simplicity. And so I like my Easter eggs and objectives for zombies to be in the background. I like for all that stuff to be there, but I don't really care about it enough to actually do it in the game. I just want to survive. And I'll be honest, I never spent a lot of time playing on Transit. I probably got Pack-a-Punch one time when playing it, and it was probably some other people doing most of the work. But that's only because you could just pick Town on the main menu, and Town was the best area everyone wanted to get dropped off in Transit, and you don't need to deal with the bus transporting you to the area. You can just spawn in the area, and that's the zombies map. I preferred that, so that was what I played in base game Black Ops 2. This is how I get into my second big problem with Black Ops 2 Zombies, and that is that they tried to flex that Black Ops 2 is going to have multiple areas, multiple maps, and you had Bus Depot, Town, and Farm. All of these base game maps, though, were just pulled off the Transit map. They are essentially, as I said earlier, just areas from Transit, but without the bus route. This makes the game feel shallow in its approach to Zombies maps, especially coming off the diversity that was Dead Ops Arcade, Kino der Toten, and 5 from Black Ops 1. That's a lot of diversity in there for Zombies maps, whereas this is just all from Transit, but now just split up into their own Zombies maps. Jimmy Zielinski really was trying to create this massive, open, and full game's worth of Zombies content, which I love. I love all the effort, but I think a lot of it is misplaced effort that doesn't recognize what many people like about Zombies in the first place, which is the map layouts. People love the dynamic map designs that have a lot of aesthetic put into them, like Buried. Buried was a DLC map, and it was actually the last map that Jimmy Zielinski ever produced, and it's a fan favorite. It's a dynamic map that, like I mentioned, gives a lot of players new places to explore with zombies, whereas Transit is a massive map that I can only describe using one word, and that word's just apocalyptic. And that's really the only adjective I can think of to describe it. Fun fact, by the way, but the length of time you have to wait at the bus stop in Transit is actually longer than the average time you have to wait at an actual real-life bus stop. So, that's just awful. Jimmy, after Buried, was replaced by Jason Blundell, whose first lead designer position on a Zombies map was Mob of the Dead, which is another fan favorite, by the way. Jason Blundell would continue to be the leader of Zombies all the way to the most recent Call of Duty game. Jimmy stepped down after this. Jimmy Zielinski went on to become one of the animation directors at Ubisoft, so he's still making some good money out there, and he deserves it. He's extremely talented. He obviously cares about the Zombies fans, and really his only undoing was just not seemingly being able to capture his ambitions for Transit in Black Ops 2. Black Ops 2 felt like the beginning of the end of my interest in Zombies. That's not to say that there are no more good Zombies maps, but this was just not why I play Zombies, and I lost interest in it fairly quickly. It's obsessing over trying to be bigger when all the bus rides are just mundane and slow. It's trying to be more difficult, even though most of that difficulty is from doing tedious tasks or if you miss the bus, rather than the difficulty of the rounds or the zombies. It turns what was once discoverable bonuses naturally as you played the level into a chore list of things you're gonna do before you actually start relaxing and just surviving. In Transit's rough, Black Ops 2 Zombies is rough, but you can see the ambitions, and I respect that. I love this developer, and thank you for what is my favorite Zombies experience ever with Black Ops 1 with all of its DLCs. This is now going to lead into people questioning why I like Black Ops 2 more than Black Ops 1. I liked everything in Black Ops 1, but I already listed things I don't care for in Black Ops 2. But the thing is that Black Ops 1 may be a more consistent package than 2, but the multiplayer and the campaign for 2 are unforgettable. I honestly still want to finish just speaking on the storyline from earlier. You get jet missions where you feel like you can almost fly anywhere around a city. You get all these branches in the storyline. You get the amazing writing I already had talked about earlier. The critique on the action heroes of the previous game by having Frank Wood's revenge be the catalyst of this entire story, and the 40-year spanning storyline that gives you all the variety you could ever ask for in a Call of Duty game. The horse mission in particular is one of the best in Call of Duty history, with multiple ways to tackle the areas. Like, let's say you use the mortars that you get in the beginning of the mission to blow up the tanks, or you can just go the regular route and you can use the RPGs that are provided for you in these designated areas where you fight the tank. You can get on and off your horse whenever you want on this massive desert map and be approaching every encounter in the way you want. There's also this intensity that looms over you when helicopters are outside stalking the desert grounds trying to track you down and kill you. You can either avoid them or you can fight them head on and shoot them out of the sky. The replayability that this last game lacked, fixing all of this with multiple side objectives, side missions, and even a custom loadout system for the first time in the series. You can use a freaking death machine on any mission in the game if you unlock it. It's cathartic to see this type of progression being taken into account in a Call of Duty campaign. This is all simple progression, like custom loadout systems, For the missions, things like that, you do objectives, you beat the game, you unlock new stuff. None of these are supply drops or random loot boxes or uncommon, rare, epic items that you'd see only 2 years later in Advanced Warfare. So to answer your question on why Black Ops 2 is a better story than Black Ops 1, well, it doesn't really, but instead of following the narrow path intended by the developers to create a cinematic experience told to you, you are promoted to try new things, experiment with new story branches that lead to different endings, and replay the campaign as many times as your heart desires. Both are great stories, by the way. Both are great. I just have a preference. Also, they literally have Old Woods playing an Avenged Sevenfold concert in the post-credits scene, so like, come on, guys. We all know this campaign just fucking rules. Now, after 100%ing the campaign, watching Woods rock out 3 times in a row, and seeing all of the work that my bro David Vonderhaar put into utilizing the futuristic technology through shock grenades, the Guardian machines, the target locators, and the see-through wall scopes, I mean, David Vonderhaar. I will point out again that this guy has been the game design lead for nearly every Treyarch Call of Duty. It's just insane to me how much this man probably did for Call of Duty in terms of the decision making behind gameplay elements. Like the pick 10 system. If it wasn't for David and Dan Bunting, who we'll talk about later, by the way, but Dan Bunting and David, the pick 10 system in the multiplayer, which is probably the smartest and most diverse create a class system that has ever been put into Call of Duty. It's up there with Gunsmith and is only outclassed by Modern Warfare 2007 by literally creating the create a class system, which was brand new to games at the time. And that pick 10 system was probably due to David Vonderhaar and Dan Bunting. David speaks on the pick 10 system and says it'll give you a whole new way to think about your class, and if we're going right into multiplayer, I 100% agree it does. You may not want any lethal grenades or any tactical grenades, but you want extra weapon attachments or you want extra perks, etc. Or you can do the opposite, but no matter what, you only have 10 spots that can be filled for your class. You can replace your sidearm with just a knife so you can have space for something else. There's more than 10 spots in your class that you can work with, but you only have 10 points to spend, so you can only pick and use 10 of those spots. Also, it allows for less overpowered items because somebody may want an overpowered gun or an overpowered perk, but it may cost you losing some equipment, losing some attachments, or losing perks if you want an overpowered gun. Whereas if you want all the best perks, now you can do that, but you may have to sacrifice your sidearm, your equipment, and all this other stuff. And it's just a fantastic system that almost allows for a feeling of like a puzzle solving game in creating your perfect class. They also brought back Dive to Prone, which some people would complain about because they hated it in the first game and they hate how fast it feels and how it promotes drop shooting. Some people love it, though. Some people have an attachment to it. And I never used it. I always felt like it slowed down the movement system because I don't care to come to a halt midair and just fall straight down and essentially have to shoot people that way. Like, I've always felt that very much slowed down my speed of my game. And so I never cared about it one way or the other. It's there and I accept it. David Vonderhaar also really wanted to make an esports presence with Black Ops 2 because everything, and I mean nearly everything, has a counter. Basically nothing is broken, and it might have been the most balanced Call of Duty game ever created in terms of the competitive community. You had certain things like, you know, smoke grenades, which never really had like massive counters in previous titles, but now you have target locator scopes where people can shoot you through smoke grenades. You know, there's all these different things that counter off of one another in terms of equipment, but you always have to do it through that pick 10 system, and it just made for such a balanced competitive community. That would be blasphemy to little kid me who loved Modern Warfare 2007 and thought of it as the most balanced Call of Duty game ever, but even I can admit that attack helicopters were the most broken thing ever in that game. In Black Ops 2, you can become a gun god where you don't have any perks and you just focus strictly on your guns, or you can become a perk god where you fill up all 6 perk slots, which is twice as many as usual, all the wild card spots that are basically just other perks, and then you have one sidearm and that's your only gun, and that uses all 10 of your slots, by the way, but you'd basically just be a perk god with one pistol. It's an incredibly diverse and intuitive customization experience. So with this customization experience being so top notch, with this game being so balanced, how are the maps? And how are the modes? The only unfortunate part to this game's modes is that due to the new progression system, they didn't bring back wager matches. Bring back gambling for children, you fucking cowards. No, but in all out seriousness, this game brought in game modes like multi-team battles, where 3 teams this time around could duke it out instead of the standard 2-team battles, which has been in every Call of Duty before this. This was just unseen in a modern day Call of Duty at the time, and it would be so refreshing, honestly, if they would bring it back. Sadly, the spawns, though, in the new Modern Warfare 3 are so broken that if you added in a 3rd team, you'd probably just start spawning directly next to your enemy. So there was multi-team battles, you got your standard modes, you had your wager match modes, but without the wager match element. All of this is acceptable. But wait, they changed kill streaks. Now, this is when I'm going to talk about Dan Bunting for a bit, who was the online director at Treyarch for many years. But you'll notice that Treyarch has always had a vendetta against kill streaks. They've always been trying to fix kill streaks in one way or another. And they talk about in this game how they switched them to score streaks. Instead of being based on just your kills, they're now based on your score. They did this so they wouldn't be promoting camping, and instead would be promoting active team involvement to get kill streaks, rather than just sitting around and waiting to farm kills. The multiplayer lead developer, Dan Bunting, the online director, he should be recognized for always wanting to change kill streaks, like in Black Ops 1, which was the first game in the series where kill streak kills wouldn't count towards other kill streaks. Which, by the way, it's insane to think that this was even a thing before this began. Dan Bunting, just like David Vonderhaar, played a major role in gameplay developments, especially for multiplayer. Dan was the multiplayer lead for Treyarch before becoming co-studio head, and then he left based on allegations that were being pressed against him for behaviors towards female employees. And basically, I'm not going to talk about this for that long, but basically an investigation started in 2019 against him. HR recommended that he was fired based on evidence that was presented, and Bobby Kotick, who is the head of the Activision company, he was under a huge microscope at the time, being critiqued based on his treatment of a lot of the massive sexual misconduct lawsuits that Activision faced. Bobby was reportedly also protecting Dan Bunting and saying that he shouldn't be fired, but then this investigation reappeared a couple years after 2019, and Dan Bunting just left the company entirely. And the thing is about a lot of this is that Activision's behavior in the past few years has been fucking awful. That's to say the least. Like, Activision's behavior has been terrible to their women's staff. And so I don't trust Bobby Kotick. I don't really trust anybody over at Activision. I don't know Dan, but I felt his name was worth mentioning only because he was the online developer, and these videos are about the developer journey, and we know Dan Bunting played a huge role in the online aspects, because he was literally the multiplayer lead designer for nearly the entire Black Ops series, working hand in hand with David Vonderhaar, who was the gameplay lead for 18 years until just 3 months ago. Activision has always been a deplorable company, it seems like, to their employees based on lawsuits, based on everything that's happened, been terrible to their female staff, and yeah, I'm not getting that much into it. I might get more into it when we get to the final part 4 video and I talk about the state of Call of Duty in general, but for right now, I'm not getting too much into that. Dan and David, both of their hard work on Black Ops 2 led to the most competitive, balanced, and possibly best multiplayer that's ever been in a Call of Duty game. Everything from the new Create a Class system, the 15 maps at launch ranging from Hijack to Raid to Nuketown 2025 and even Slums. Most of these maps were freaking great. There may have been a few that weren't in rotation due to being kind of lackluster, but at least 10 of these 15 maps were solid and giving the constant changing of maps that is needed in the multiplayer rotation so nothing feels stale. Not like some of the newer Call of Duty maps where you get the feeling that you are playing the same 3 maps on repeat for 5 hours straight. Like, guys, I'm just gonna say it. Black Ops 2 is a near masterpiece. Genuinely one of, if not the best Call of Duty game out there. And I'm gonna be real for a second with you. I play a lot of video games. I don't usually play Call of Duty. I'm not like a COD fanboy. A lot of these games, some of them are really, really good. And some of them, a lot of them actually, are only good really when you compare them to other Call of Duty games. And a lot of these titles I wouldn't even consider that good when you compare them to just other first-person shooters that are out there. That's not to say I don't like Call of Duty. I mean, hell, dude, I've been playing the series for 20 years now, but a lot of these games aren't the best, and I'll admit that. But Black Ops 2 is up there with maybe 4 or 5 Call of Duty games that I would say that you have to play even if you're just a video game fan and not a Call of Duty fan. I would put this as one of the best first-person shooters to have come out in the 2010s, and I think that's some of the highest praise I can give a game. And the real question on everybody's minds, I think even people who like Black Ops 3, is what happened after Black Ops 2. Jimmy Zielinski was replaced by Jason Blundell, who is the main producer from now on the entire Zombies mode. Dave Anthony left as a writer, and so did David S. Goyer. Craig Houston stayed on as a writer, and he was been the writer for multiple games so far. Jason Blundell got a lot more involved in the writing because they needed more writers on the script, and he actually wrote all the zombie scripts as well. Corky Limcall was still there as the game director, and Dan Bunting got promoted to Dave Anthony's spot as the co-game director, with Corky and Blundell now. So now there was Corky, Blundell, and Dan Bunting all as the game directors. Colin Whitney stayed on as the lead artist. Not everyone left. It was really only 3 people who left. But with the change of leadership and changing of most of the writers, we were left with a game that just feels directionless. Black Ops 3 was left directionless in terms of where the franchise should go for story and even gameplay, with this being the first title that was mimicking games like Titanfall. The futuristic gameplay didn't feel innovative in any way, but instead it felt like it was copying other games. Advanced Warfare would be argued to be the first copy of Titanfall, but at least Advanced Warfare felt like it was more focused on its new strafing system, whereas Black Ops 3 quite literally feels verbatim like it's copying Titanfall's advanced movement. Black Ops 3 was left confused too because it's trying to mimic the indirect storytelling of the previous 2 titles, but significantly less connected and less sensical to the overarching story of Black Ops. It was also left in the hands of Activision, who at the time were extremely greedy through supply drop trends and pay for zombies gear like gobblegums, that neither of which was in the previous titles. I'm gonna say good stuff about Black Ops 3, by the way, but I'll be honest, there is not a single attribute about this game that excels, especially not the campaign. And I want to emphasize before getting into this that it's not a bad game by any means. It has a massive cult following. It actually probably, if we're talking about cult followings, not just followings, it has the biggest cult following in the entire Call of Duty series by a mile. But I want to dissect what happened here because I think it's kind of safe to say that everybody can agree there was a massive shift from Black Ops 2 to Black Ops 3. From 2012 to 2015, stuff was just, there had to have been stuff going on at Treyarch about this. I want to talk about the quality of the game because even if it doesn't excel in quality, that doesn't mean it's not in general a good game. And I want to ask also the most important question of all, one that I've asked myself for years, which is why do people love Black Ops 3? But first, I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger because music round. Before we get into music round, I do want to explain it. Every single time you hear that ding, it means we're in music round, which please, if you have stuck around for the video this long, we're in the last 3 games now, please like the video, please subscribe, join the appreciation game. I want the algorithm to be able to curve my videos, and so the only way to do that is through comments, likes, subscribers, and watch time. So please help me out with all the support you can. I would love to make a living making videos like this for you all. In the last video, I did 1-minute music rounds for every single game where I talked about the composer, the music, and everything I liked about it. This video, I'm gonna cover all the games with a slightly lengthier music round, but it will work better so there's not 7 different music rounds scattered around this video. Instead, it's going to be one. We're going to talk about it for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to go right back to the games. So let's talk about Call of Duty 3. Not Black Ops 3, but Call of Duty 3. The composer's name was Joel Goldsmith, the man behind most of the soundtrack for the Stargate series. Joel Goldsmith, while being rushed and most likely didn't have a lot of time to make this soundtrack with that short 8-month development period of Call of Duty 3, they did manage to make a stellar theme. Call of Duty 3's song, appropriately titled Call of Duty, is kind of in contrast to Call of Duty 2's theme, which is way more dreary and gross. Call of Duty 2's theme has that horror of war vibe to it, whereas Call of Duty 3's theme is in contrast and it's triumphant and relieving. And my theory on this music choice was due to the subject matter of the story of Call of Duty 3. It's a campaign about the last push against Nazis. It's all about the battles that led to the Nazis' demise. And this would give you a victorious feeling rather than needing the horror soundtrack of Call of Duty 2. I love that he took inspiration from other places that was not just the first 2 games, and he didn't just copy the predecessor's theme. Joel Goldsmith, if you hear this, I really do love your theme. And here is just a sample of it. Most of the soundtrack for Call of Duty 3 feels more ambient. It feels non-intrusive, it's subtle, it creates a gritty atmosphere, but whenever that theme hits, you know you've won the battle. And I think that's the best part about it. It's not a soundtrack that I would say you're going to constantly listen to, but it's one that creates the atmosphere of Call of Duty 3 pretty well. Whereas most of that game I don't really care for, the soundtrack's actually pretty good. Now, Call of Duty World at War and Black Ops 1 had a composer named Sean Murray. We will be discussing a couple of musicians in this bit because not only was there Sean Murray, who is the main composer, but we also have to discuss the work on the Zombies themes and the Zombies iconic theme called Damned. This theme has rung so iconic for video games that it's basically like how the Halloween theme does for horror movies. We're about to ring off a few different names of composition directors like Kevin Sherwood and James McCauley, who were not only some of the original composers for the Zombies music, but Kevin Sherwood even plays the guitar for many of the songs. I'm going to slap up here the back of the Black Ops 1 cover so you can just kind of get a look at everybody's names who was involved. And while I am just going to give some major shout outs, it's going to be to people like, a good example would be Brian Toohey, who was the audio director and sound designer for Treyarch games. He composed many of the Zombies music as well. He remixed the Black Ops 1 Zombies theme for Black Ops 2, and he made the classic banger called Samantha's Lullaby. This shit goes so hard. Samantha's Lullaby is great, and the Zombies theme, originally called Damn, is written by Kevin Sherwood in particular, with the remix version being done by Brian Toohey in Black Ops 2. World at War, though, the Zombies theme in this game was drastically different from the Damned iconic song in Black Ops 1, and it's more akin to rock and roll and metal bands. The album was created by Kevin Sherwood and Brian Toohey. It's a crazy, amazing theme, but it's just such a drastic departure from what we hear in Zombies music, like what we associate with Zombies music. And another name I would like to bring up is that James McCauley guy earlier who I mentioned. I should mention that he did almost all the music for Dead Ops Arcade, while also being one of the main sound designers at Treyarch since Call of Duty 3. James McCauley's just over here just fucking killing it. These talented artists are just some of the people who poured their hearts out into the Zombies music. And now we can loop back around to Sean Murray, who is the main composer for World at War and Black Ops 1. Sean Murray's music on World at War is fitting, but occasionally overshadowed by how loud the game can be. And this can also happen in Call of Duty 3, which is a very loud game a lot of the time. One thing that has never been overshadowed, though, about Sean Murray's World at War theme, and one thing that I love, it's possibly one of my all-time favorite Call of Duty songs, is the Russian theme. It's loud, it's in your face, like the way that Reznov talks about killing every Nazi in his path, and it's just fucking enchanting, dude. The way the instruments get focused in on and then they lessen to make way for the harsh tenor and high alto voices who clash together in symphony to create this bombastic and truly epic theme. And it's been said before, but the intro to the Vendetta mission in World at War is so amazing, and part of that is due to the music. The song is called Fountain and is just the start to one of the most ominous and creepy intros for a video game level ever. Sean Murray just blew it out of the water with creating an atmospheric soundtrack from start to finish, with possibly the main menu music being one of the best tracks in the game. Sometimes the songs can be hard to hear, but it's always there and enhances what World at War does best, which is being immersive. Now, this is the main menu music for World at War. Now, this is the main menu music for Black Ops 1. Yeah, you see the difference there, but it's a good difference. World at War is based in the terror, whereas Black Ops 1 is discreet with its quieter moments, but when it's loud, it's just a fucking action movie. It's that perfect way to sum up Black Ops 1 as a whole, which is why I think it works and it's the most popular song in the game. Because it's the main menu music, but also it's just a fucking action movie with some discrete moments that kind of fit in with that Cold War backdrop. Sean Murray, you knew exactly what you were doing, and you were cooking. Great job, Sean Murray. Great job, Kevin Sherwood. Great job, Brian Toohey, Joel Goldsmith, and James McCauley. You all did a fantastic job on these songs, plus the extra work that some of you like James McCauley and Brian Toohey put into the sound design as well. Why did we say all of those before speaking on Black Ops 2's soundtrack? Well, it's because the main composer for the rest of the Black Ops games was changed from Sean Murray to Jack Wall. Jack Wall really killed it with his Black Ops 2 soundtrack, where the main menu theme was just as iconic as Black Ops 1 or World at War. It has a subwoofer boom sound effect with some of the lower notes that gives it that futuristic ring to it, but it still maintains the rock and roll elements with the drums coming in midway through the song. The anthem song rules, Rivers and Rain, and Shadows, all of these songs rock. But post Black Ops 2, Jack Wall, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't really care for the Black Ops 3 theme. I feel that Jack Wall just didn't really care about a lot of the music in the campaign, but instead focused all of his energy into just a few songs in Black Ops 3. Most of the songs sound like they either shouldn't be in the game at all, or they sound like they're kind of stockish sound effects being used as samples, and it's just kind of like the vibe of the multiplayer theme. Like, the multiplayer theme is not good, like, at all. Like, it sounds really, like, I don't even like to use the word cheap, because, like, what does cheap mean in terms of music? But it just sounds like stockish sound effects being used as samples. It's just a really forgettable multiplayer theme. And that's not to say that Jack Wall is a bad composer. It just doesn't sound like he was having a fun time when making this stuff. And if you aren't having fun when making your own art, then the audience that is listening to it won't have fun either. He did do one thing right, though, and that was snake skin boots, which feels rooted in the inspiration from artists like John Coltrane with its jazzy tone. This is the theme for Shadows of Evil, and honestly might be my favorite thing about the whole map.
As it seems, oh, slide on in, magic little wicked queen, come on, take a spin. The evil cannot get us, we'll take them on jackpot, snakes in boots on a Saturday night. Kicking down doors, trying to make it happen, swing don't miss, then the wicked fight.
Not that the map is terrible, the map's not, but that's just a testament to how good this song sounds. Jack Wall continued to be the main composer behind the last two Treyarch games, and I think Black Ops 4 confirms that theory of mine that Jack Wall and that Activision asking him to make these generic, futuristic shit is just something he was never into. But when it came up to zombies, he was just having the time of his life. His Voyage of Despair song called Right Where We Belong is energetic, and even though it doesn't really feel in place with other zombies themes, it doesn't really have anything, you know, dreadful about it or spooky or ominous or whatever. It's just like the Snakeskin Boots song. It fits with what it wants to be, and it works on its own. These are two just kinetic and enjoyable pieces of music to listen to on their own. They don't really fit that well with zombies. The old zombies themes fit well with zombies as a mode. These don't really fit that well, but they fit well with the time period and the setting of the Zombies map, and they just sound good on their own. Like, I could listen to these songs just on my spare time and not even think about a Zombies map and just be having a blast.
We're happy right where we belong. The sea is rolling, the weather is fine,
and the dinner bells tolling, supper time. Down the grand staircase glide the two sons. They're going through some toothsome transformations. Things may be different someday.
Jack Wall, this is exactly what he wanted to make, and that's why they are his best work in these games. These Zombies themes and the Black Ops 2 soundtrack are some of the best stuff before the resurgence period from 2019 to 2023. Jack Wall just wants to make some cool ambient music with the occasional complete works of art that he does all on his own. That's his own personal music, and it doesn't always fit, but this talented artist nonetheless has done some amazing work. I think he just loves doing other stuff because he changes tones from Voyage of Despair to 9 and Zombies as needed for the settings. And it's obvious that he just loves doing it. The songs are just significantly better in Zombies than they are in the rest of the main game. And it's because Activision actually lets this man cook in Zombies. You know, we got to talk about it, but last but not least, how's the Black Ops Cold War music? Well, there's the song called 1981, there's the Cold War theme, and even though the Zombies theme is made by Kevin Sherwood, this Zombies theme also slaps. And it's extremely underrated Zombies theme, actually. Kevin Sherwood is actually quite well known in the Zombies community for making every Zombies Easter egg soundtrack, which I didn't even know exists, to be honest with you. I remember like clicking on phone lines and you can make like Eminem play or something, but I didn't know there was Easter egg songs that people looked for in Zombies. That's actually like kind of news to me. But Kevin Sherwood wrote all of those songs. Whereas that 1981 song and the Cold War theme, those were made by Jack Wall. And those are great pieces of music as well. This is 1981. And this is the Cold War theme. It's a long-ass music round, but now we're back on Black Ops 3 with first approaching the directionalist aspect of this game, just like the directionalist aspect of this video with the random music round. Black Ops 3 came out in 2015, now with a 3-year cycle, with Black Ops 2 coming out in 2012, and while Treyarch had 3 games coming out in the Golden Age, this was the first game to come out in the Dark Ages that ranged from Ghosts to Black Ops 4. And with Black Ops 3's biggest detriment, from what I can gather, is that they could not think of where to go next. World at War was a World War II game, and then there was an indirect sequel through Black Ops 1, and then there was another indirect sequel through Black Ops 2, which was a futuristic game. All of these games played off of each other beautifully in the Golden Age, whereas Black Ops 3 doesn't really know what to do anymore. With the leadership changes taking place internally, the decision-based ending of Black Ops 2 where they had to make one of the endings canon, and the new writers, and they made it take place so far removed from Black Ops 2 that ultimately none of your decisions really matter. It takes the idea of an indirect sequel to a whole new level, to the point where it doesn't even feel like a sequel to anything. That's not necessarily even a bad thing, by the way. Like, I love anthology stories. I love stories that have to do with different characters every single time. They all are different short stories, whatever it is. But with losing the game's directors and writers, it feels like Jason Blundell had too much on his hands. And what I mean by that is that this guy was the game director, he was one of the writers, he was the campaign director, and he was the zombies director all at once on Black Ops 3. That can get a bit overwhelming and can almost be a detriment to your job, like, because you can't just focus on one thing, you're focusing on everything for the last 3 years. And Craig Houston, he got a whole new writing team to work for him on this one, which included Jason Blundell as one of the writers, and then they pulled one of the Treyarch engineers named Dan Laufer, and then they pulled a guy named Joe Paraluski, who was new to the team as well. Like, there was no writers that had a lot of previous experience helping out with the Black Ops 3 script. Whereas like David S. Goyer, he worked in films. Dave Anthony had been writing video game screenplays for years. And with all of this on their hands, plus everything Jason Blundell was having to do at the time, plus losing leadership, and ultimately just not knowing where to go with the series, led to some noticeable mistakes, especially with the campaign. And that's what we're talking about first, with the story. I cannot describe to you the story to this game. I really can't. I'm sorry. I sometimes have a problem where sometimes I'll focus in and out of a story. Sometimes you'll hear me describe a story on this channel and I might be a little bit off from what maybe the story was, but I get the major themes, I get the major characters, and I try to understand that stuff. This is a story I could not follow. I literally just couldn't. It was either too boring or too convoluted. So I will allow the internet to solve this plot for me. And the synopsis is so long for it, by the way, that I can't even read off the whole synopsis. So I have to actually summarize the synopsis from the internet. This is from Wikipedia. You play as a guy or gal who is a Black Ops soldier. You go on a mission to rescue some hostages and you get hurt, so you're carried back by a soldier named Taylor to undergo cybernetic surgery to fix yourself in the year 2065, which is 40 years after Black Ops 2. Once you get out of surgery, you're the player, and Hendrix, who is another soldier who underwent surgery, you figure out that the man who saved you, named Taylor, killed a group of people from a gang called 54 Immortals while he was on a mission to recover data about them. He stole the data and he defected. You and Hendrix figure out Taylor's last location, which is an uninhabitable island where 300,000 people died without a trace. They find a guy named Diaz who has been leaking info. You kill him, and then you link to his DNI, which is like this digital network interface, which is this massive thing that like all your cybernetic brains have, where you have like, you know, it's like, you can like read somebody's thoughts and memories and stuff, like whatever. I don't know. That's what they do. They review the info in his head though, and they find out Taylor was actually trying to find survivors on this uninhabitable island. We're introduced to a person who does illegal surgeries that allow people to experience calmness through their DNI through images of a frozen tree. And this procedure goes under the name of Corvus. You and Hendrix chase down Taylor, but soon discover the man who did the frozen tree experiments did this to Taylor and everyone around you. Corvus, which is the illegal intelligence that's used for the frozen tree experiments, it's now malfunctioning. When one of them tries to scan the DNI of, I forget who it is, but we'll just say for the argument that it was the guy who you scanned earlier, Diaz. This causes Taylor and everyone who scanned that DNI to go crazy searching for the frozen tree. You find out that Corvus released a Nova 6 gas. That's your tie into the previous Black Ops games, by the way, Nova 6 gas. Corvus released Nova 6 gas onto Singapore, and that you and Hendrix are going to try and stop it from killing everyone. Hendrix is following Corvus's instructions though, because now Hendrix's mind has been tampered with by Corvus, and at this point he's being controlled after scanning that previous DNI. And Hendrix ends up killing Taylor, and he kills a man named Kruger that I don't even know what they were doing with, but I don't care at this point. This is already too complicated. Corvus malfunctions as an intelligence and is using Hendrix. Your character kills Hendrix, and now you plan to kill yourself so they can prevent Corvus from spreading to person via the DNI network. Corvus causes you to spawn in a frozen forest though, and then you see Taylor still existing in the DNI network after death. You and Taylor decide to purge your DNIs simultaneously, rendering Corvus useless. Now you wake up and your player says their name is Taylor.
Imagine yourself
What's your name, soldier?
in a frozen forest.
I said, what's your name?
Taylor.
And that's the end of the game. The point of the ending was meant to show that you had died in surgery in the beginning of the game, but your consciousness remained in Taylor's DNI, who was actually, I think, working with Hendrix. This is where I kind of just started to dip off. I'm sorry to anybody. If anybody is really passionate about this campaign, please explain it to me if you know. But at the end of the game, you purge not only your own DNI, but you purge Corvos out of it, and the player's main character is purged from Taylor's DNI, so now he's just back to being Taylor, hence why you wake up at the very end and you say your name is Taylor, because now your main character is not in his DNI anymore when he died in the beginning of the game and like passed on to Taylor. Like, I think he passed on through Taylor reading your DNI when you were dying or something. Because Taylor's the one who saved you in the beginning. I don't know. This is confusing. Like, please let me know if anybody can simplify the story. Please list it in the comments, because I've honestly never seen anyone ever explain this story to me well. I've never heard anybody be able to explain it. That's how poor the storytelling is. And from what I can gather, this was not the original plan at all with Black Ops 3. The original plan was that the next step in the evolution for Black Ops 3 would have been to go open world, actually, or semi-open world with the campaign. And this makes sense, seeing that the missions become more and more open from Black Ops 1 to Black Ops 2. Like, the horse mission is a pretty big freaking sandbox level. Like, there's some pretty big sandbox levels in Black Ops 2. And so going semi-open world in Black Ops 3 really isn't the biggest stretch. I'll leave this link in the description below, as well with the blog post earlier that had to do with World at War Zombies development, but it shows off multiple assets and environments that were originally going to be developed to create an open world for Black Ops 3, but it just never came to fruition. I'm not normally the type of person who cares if something directly connects or not, but this game not only doesn't care about connecting to the previous titles, it kind of actively avoids it. It almost makes me think, with all the new writers and Jason Blundell being more part of the writing team, that everybody was just trying to get away from the World at War Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2 stories and just kind of create something wholly new. But if that's the case, why is it called Black Ops 3? Even if it wasn't called Black Ops 3, it doesn't tell a compelling story. It tells a story that's nonsensical, it's confusing, and it's completely incompetent from a writing standpoint. And if I missed any details, or if you believe I'm wrong about the campaign, then just please tell me down below, because this is possibly the worst campaign in the series for me. Genuinely, it probably is the worst campaign in the series for me. It fails on nearly all fronts with little to no variety, a hub area that makes customization just more confusing than Black Ops 2, and characters that if a gun was held to my head, I could not remember a single one of their names, even just after reading that synopsis to you. I would go further into this with the equipment and whatnot, the hub world, but I'll be honest, I don't want to play this campaign more. I played it one time all the way about 5 months ago. I remember nothing, I gained nothing, and I really don't want to revisit such a boring experience. I'll give credit to a couple of things though. I mean, like the cyber cores was a good idea, because that's a fun concept that adds more variety to my gameplay. Basically, they worked like power-ups, and you could attach them to your exosuit, and you could do things like remote hacking enemies. You had different categories of cyber cores. Some were like, you know, based around controlling, and some were based around mayhem. There's a lot of them in the game, and you'll find yourself favoriting a couple of them, but they do add a little bit of replayability to a customization system. The problem though isn't with the added equipment, or even with the added customization crates in missions that let you change on the fly, which is really convenient. It's all in the story, the unsure level design that was originally going to be open world, and then they just kind of trimmed it all down, and just pretentious, obnoxious writing. Mark Lamia, who is the studio head of Treyarch, describes that the 3-year cycle of development allowed them to make a more detailed Call of Duty than ever before, and one that could take risks. If there was one word for me to describe Call of Duty Black Ops 3, risk is not one of them. The open world idea, or at least sandbox mission variety, would have been, you know, would have worked with your wall running, would have worked with your thruster packs. and it would have been at least kind of risky, but it wasn't even developed. To me, risky was making zombies in the first place in World at War. To me, risky was making Black Ops 1 a nearly entirely cinematic linear experience, putting all of your cards into making just a compelling story. Black Ops 2 being in the freaking future that wasn't even gaining popularity yet, that was risky. It was risky for a World War II focused series to go to the future, and it's been risky to tell indirect sequel storylines in every single Black Ops title. Black Ops 3 rides off the trends of Titanfall's movement by not even focusing on the strafing like the last game did, but instead just giving you a thruster pack and letting you wall run, the two traits that Titanfall constantly utilizes. And by the way, they do it better than Black Ops 3. Think about it like this in terms of campaign. Black Ops 3 and Battle Royales were literally the reason why Black Ops 4 didn't have a campaign. Like, really let that sink in. That's how bad this campaign was received. And from the writing, Craig Houston seems like a great guy. Like, honestly, well, at least as a writer, I don't actually know about him personally. And whenever I feel like I want to say somebody's a great guy who works for Activision, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. Like, no offense to the dude. I mean, he's probably fine. But like, as a writer, he started off making comic books, and then he moved to the US with a full-time job at Treyarch. In interviews, though, he never seems interested in speaking about Black Ops 3's story. He seems way more interested in emphasizing the amount there is to do in Black Ops 3, rather than the story itself, which is something they talked about in Black Ops 2, Black Ops 1, and even World at War. And I know I've been crapping on Black Ops 3 a lot, but it's because I am saving all my positives for the end. And the amount there is to do, what that Craig Houston likes to talk about, is one of the positives. Now let's move on to gameplay, which I could see why a lot of people like it, but it's just not really my thing. The maps are well designed and they are tailored towards your exosuit system, probably even more so than Advanced Warfare, with walls that you can actually run on, areas that promote exosuit usage, and never having to leave the upper area of the map if you don't even feel like it, if you just know and have enough skill to be able to get from one surface to the next. This is my favorite part of the movement and the map layout in this game, and it's actually a major positive. The maps are probably my favorite part about the multiplayer, because most other stuff like the movement system, I just don't like it that much. I don't think it's as deliberate as I want it to be. It's all down to preference, but they talk about Black Ops 3's movement system and how it's based on exactly where you're pointing with the analog stick when flying and wall running, and that's it. They talk about how essentially it's exactly where you're pointing. And because of this freedom, it doesn't feel like there's deliberate moves that you do. And that's what I enjoyed about the exosuit system in Advanced Warfare. Advanced Warfare feels less like a Titanfall copy because the point of the system is that you're dashing to the right, you're dashing to the left, you're dashing upward, or you're dashing downward or forward or backwards. There is no freedom in the analog movement, but it's almost like turn-based, like you're essentially clicking in one direction and that's where your dash commits. You're committing to that move. And that creates less freedom, but I also think that is more of a skill gap for a lot of people. I feel like that if you're good enough with that strafing system, you can do some really impressive stuff, whereas the arc system to me is a little bit just more fun rather than strategic. And I could see more people preferring the Black Ops 3 system, and that's totally okay. I don't think it's like a bad system, and I am happy it's different from Advanced Warfare's. Some people may think I lost a brain cell or two, because why wouldn't I want more freedom? But I don't know. It's just a preference thing. I like the skill gap more. I like how it's like very turn, like you're doing the deliberate movement. You have to commit to your action. And so if you mess up, like that's completely on you. Whereas Black Ops 3, I feel like there's just a little bit more of like a freedom to it that is more fun, but it's less skill in my opinion. But like I said, this is really just a preference thing. I don't really have an explanation or too big of a spiel about it, why, you know, Advanced Warfares would work better to me or anything. I'm not docking Black Ops 3 in my head because of this system versus Advanced Warfares. I'm just talking about which one I prefer. One last thing we should talk about, by the way, is the Exos and the Specialist class systems, which feels like a natural progression off of Black Ops 2. I think another reason why I had such a grudge against the movement of Black Ops 3 is because it never felt like it was progressing off of Black Ops 2, but the specialist stuff, that felt like it was expanding off of Black Ops 2, and it allowed that extra step of customization with your characters, your specialist abilities. Some of the maps allow you to shoot and swim underwater, while others allow you to thruster to the high ground and use wall running to stay up on the high ground. The maps are genuinely the best part about the multiplayer, even if the art direction's not the best. Some weapon customization is a little better with Black Ops 3's version of Gunsmith, before it was completely revamped in Modern Warfare 2019 as the new Gunsmith system. Overall, though, in terms of movement, maps, specialists who add more customization, and everything's pretty well balanced, there's nothing really more I want to discuss. I mean, I'll discuss a little bit about the balancing before moving on to the next thing that everyone wants to hear about, and I know you do. We'll talk about it, I swear. It's the thing everybody talks about with Black Ops 3. But before we get to it, we'll talk about balancing. This is probably the best game in the Dark Ages in terms of balancing, with the exception of Black Ops 4, which is surprisingly well balanced. In a lot of these older Call of Duty games, there's pay-to-win systems now, since Activision will add back in pay-to-win skins and weapons to Call of Duty if they are like more than 5 years old, because they believe that nobody's actually going to care, but there are still some people who do play these games and they do care when you add pay-to-win weapons. In this game at launch, and for a while, there was the Gorgon, which was pretty overpowered, the KN-44, which was slightly overpowered, but nothing felt broken. Nothing feels like the MP-40 from World at War, or the Akimbo models from Modern Warfare 2. And Dan Bunting and David Vonderhaar, I feel, have always been good about keeping things fairly balanced in their Call of Duty multiplayers. They even updated the multiplayer recently to fix hackers that were putting malware on your computers, which, by the way, that's like weirdly appreciated from me, because that should have just been default in the first. Like, that should not be happening in a game anyway. But like, at least they updated it, I guess. Whatever. Now it's time to talk about the thing everyone's been waiting for. Black Ops 3, I can diss all the time. And I used to kind of hate this game. This used to be like my least favorite Call of Duty game, like ever.
What?
And I think that's crazy in retrospect. I would never say that nowadays. So, like, feel free to, you know, diss on me for that opinion years ago, back in, like, 2016. I mentioned earlier we were going to talk about why people love this game. And there's actually two reasons, outside of possibly really enjoying the multiplayer. I've heard a lot of people really like the multiplayer. It's not a game that really excels at any piece of quality, but one reason why I think I know people love it is because it excels at content. This is by far the most you get out of any Call of Duty ever. This has the most content, hands down. I'm going to tell you just what comes with the base game, and I'm only going to talk about the extra modes and zombies. You have Shadows of Evil, which is a massive zombies map. You have Dead Ops Arcade 2, and you have a Nightmares mode, which is the entire campaign reworked with a zombies narrative. You have free runs, which is basically wall running and movement-based trials for you to master and do like time trials with them and stuff. And you have the best thing, which is only on the PC version, but it's custom zombies, which allows you to connect to Steam Workshop and download people's community-made zombies maps. This is a first and a last for the Call of Duty franchise for people to download custom-made zombies maps. You can download a fucking Death Star map or Minecraft map in zombies. I just listed to you all those modes, the infinite community-made content, and a zombies campaign. And that was just the extra modes in the game. That didn't include anything from multiplayer or campaign, which now goes into my second reason why people love this game. And that is just the zombies, period. Long ago in this video, I mentioned people were clamoring for a Call of Duty that was just a full-blown zombies game. And while that may never happen, this is the closest thing you'll ever get today. This game has enough zombies content, especially with the DLC Zombies Chronicles, to fill up 100+ hours worth of playtime. And to 100% this game probably would take you hundreds of hours if you were to do absolutely everything. I ain't gonna pretend it's all good, but it's worth noting, like, not many people played all the way through Nightmares mode. It's pretty boring, and I'd probably recommend it over the actual storyline, but like, not many people probably played Nightmares mode. Free runs feel like tutorial movement maps with just some time trials, and Dead Ops Arcade 2 barely feels like an evolution off the original Dead Ops Arcade. It kinda has a story now, like a really cheesy story, but nobody knows what it is. If you do, please type it down below. I would love to hear about it, because I see like robotic gorillas and stuff in it, and I don't even know what's going on. The best piece of content they did add, though, was that infinite amount of community-made content with mods that they've allowed into the PC version of the game. Community-made content can almost always keep a game alive forever, and it's usually why developers don't support it, because they just want you to buy the newest iteration of their game rather than staying on the old one. Community-made content does work, and communities that adore these games, like Black Ops 3's cult community does, they will keep this game alive for as long as they possibly can, and I love them for that. Like, you guys are awesome. If you own all the Zombies DLC, it's like 14 Zombies maps, plus all the infinite community content, and plus everything else. It is the ultimate Zombies experience. And I only prefer Black Ops 1 Zombies because I'm a whore for Jimmy Zielinski, and it was a harder Zombies difficulty than Black Ops 3. And since I'm a whore and I just want to be slapped as hard as I can be, I prefer the harder Zombies difficulty. Black Ops 3 Zombies to me only suffers from things like Gobblegum and that it can be a little bit too easy, but I don't even use them, so it doesn't really affect my experience. So, you know, but it does make the game way too easy, and the fact that they are tied to purchasable items is just frustrating to me. But, you know, whatever. I'm not gonna really diss that hard. Shadows of Evil is a great map with an amazing atmosphere, but suffers only from being so damn up its own ass about its Easter egg journey. Like, if you're just into the survival stuff, good luck, because it's gonna be difficult not to get roped into swinging around as a monster and doing some ritual shit to unlock something that's based around an Easter egg that's gonna help you get, you know, Pack-a-Punch or whatever. It embodies that chore list feeling that I personally just don't like about Black Ops 2 or Black Ops 3 Zombies maps. There's really two types of Zombies players that we went over earlier, and I understand if you enjoy it. I'm not going to stop you from enjoying it, but I just don't care. That all being said, though, I don't think the Shadows of Evil is that bad, and it's at least extremely aesthetically pleasing with its 40s and 50s backdrop and its crazy fun stereotype characters, which Zombies are known for. And oh my god, I just realized I never even gave respect to the original Zombies cast, but they're iconic. Fred Tatasciore as Nikolai, Nolan North as Edward Richtofen, Steve Blum as Tank Dempsey, and Tom Kane as Takeo Mizaki. Their lines have been spewed out by people of an entire generation every day to friend groups, to inside, you know, group chats or whatever. Like, people constantly quote the original Zombies cast. Speaking of casting, whoever picked the Law and Order Special Victims Unit guy to be in the Black Ops 3 campaign, hats off to you, bro, because that is the funniest casting choice I've ever seen in a video game. This game's got some actual acting chops, to be honest with you, with Jeff Goldblum in the Zombies mode, with Neil McDonough, Heather Graham, and fucking Ron Perlman. Hellboy's in this game. Black Ops 3 was just flexing money when it came to some of its actors, but the Zombies mode does that a lot, actually, especially with like Bruce Campbell in Advanced Warfare. There's so much I want to say, but it's so difficult in a video that's already going to be 3 hours long, so I'll just say this. Black Ops 3 Zombies is arguably the best out there, especially with the DLCs, but even without it, there's still an argument to be made, because we're only discussing the base games. It still has 3 full Zombies experience, even if I only care about one of them, and it has unlimited content through its community system if you're playing on PC, and that's honestly the best thing about Black Ops 3 to me. It's the most feature-filled Call of Duty game ever made, and I almost find it difficult to talk about because I'm not gonna put hundreds of hours into this game to play absolutely everything. I'm just not. It's just not a game I love that way. I don't love this game enough, but I absolutely understand why other people love this game. I think it could have been so much more in terms of at least campaign, because that's its biggest downfall, and I think most Call of Duty players don't really care about the campaign, so it's normally forgiven in the case of this game because, you know, people love the zombies, people love the multiplayer, but it's such a fall from grace when you compare it to World at War, Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2's campaigns that were in the golden age, because those campaigns were absolutely stellar. So, all in all, Black Ops 3 does have plenty of faults, but it has too much to offer its players to not be applauded for that alone. And it tries hard enough in some areas to justify the massive cult following that it has. And I hope Black Ops 3 lovers are satisfied, because I do have to move on, because we are already on page 44 of a script that I didn't want to go past 50 pages, but I did. It's like 58 pages. Time to move on. Move on past the frozen tree and enter 2018, which was the last year of the Dark Ages. And I also will ask again that if I have gotten any information wrong, please correct me down below, and please tell me your opinions on these games down below. This whole channel is about appreciating and evaluating art as a whole, and I think we all benefit from hearing each other's opinions on here. So unless you're fucking stupid, I'm just kidding. Don't let anyone tell you that your opinion's, wrong or some dumb shit like that. It's not. This is the last game of the Dark Ages in 2018, and honestly, it was never really liked. It has a much smaller cult following than Black Ops 3 does, and right afterwards, it would enter the resurgence period with Modern Warfare 2019, so nobody really talks about this game. And some people had a soft spot for Blackout, but with the evolution of Warzone, nobody even plays Blackout anymore. Black Ops 4 is a little bit confusing because it's in its conception, when they talk about it through the development period, is that they were talking about it as a quote-unquote social game. It was made to have live service elements that would play into the battle royale. It was made to be team focused, and that was really meant it would be streamed more on Twitch. Dan Bunting talks about this in an interview where he mentions that the main focus was the social connectivity of making the game competitive, as in that it would be entertaining for a player, but it would also be entertaining for a spectator, because he talks about how big Twitch streaming is nowadays and streaming in general. This is like all fine, but it's kind of confusing. It just doesn't even sound like what now we're focusing on what's going to be good for streaming and what's going to be good as a social live service game rather than just a game itself being good. I don't know, it's just weird to me the way they phrase it, but whatever. This is all fine on paper, but the problems really come from the detriment that Call of Duty is an annual franchise. They talk about this game as if it was going to be updated for years to come, and it kinda was, but nobody stayed on it. They released Warzone a year later, so Blackout died out almost immediately. The player base didn't stay around, especially with the new Call of Duty coming out next year with a brand new engine. Like, who is even going to stay around for Black Ops 4? That's my biggest issue with Call of Duty right now in general. They're trying to follow the live service trends in gaming, but yet they're an annual franchise. So like, what's the point? Like, you're not updating the game. You're just getting rid of the old game, bringing in the new game, and that's it. Take Modern Warfare 3 as an example, which was going to be DLC for Modern Warfare 2. It could have been, with honestly how little there is added to it. We would have finally had a break from Call of Duty for 1 year, and they could have focused on evolving Modern Warfare 2, releasing this DLC, and updating the experience with new maps and modes. They always say that's going to happen. They always say this is a game that's going to be developed for years upon years, but then they just release a game again the next year. Like, I feel like Warzone 2 just came out like a year ago, and they're already talking about Warzone 3. It defeats the whole purpose of following the live service model, because 50% of that model is literally just having an evolving, ever-evolving game. The other 50% is just money, so I don't know, like, you can think whatever you want about it. I just think it's interesting that this annual franchise is obsessed with also having a live service model, where when you look at the live service model, it really only works when your game is not an annual franchise. It really works when it's like a subscription-based game. It's Destiny 2, it's Fortnite, it's Halo Infinite, or whatever. Black Ops 4 suffers so greatly from this that you can't even play 75% of the game anymore. Like, I was lucky to find a few matches, and from what I played, I really enjoyed it, and I wish I could play more, because this was a Call of Duty game that I didn't get to put a lot of time into. And Blackout, the freaking Battle Royale mode, is dead. So really, that just leaves zombies. David Vonderhaar, though, gives some interesting insights into some major changes into the Black Ops 4 multiplayer. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go based off of my memory of this multiplayer and the few matches I played recently, and we're gonna go along with what David Vonderhaar says about the changes they made to the game's multiplayer and talk about what works and what doesn't. I think that's a pretty fair way to go over a lot of the stuff in the game. The class-based system is back, but as David talks about in his interview, he discusses that it is cooldown based rather than inventory based. So instead of you having like 2 grenades that you can use whenever, you have a grenade, and when you use it, there's a cooldown for when you can use your next grenade. This, in my opinion, works for the game, but it doesn't feel like Call of Duty at all. Like, it works for this game, considering the game is class-based, and it's just an extension of the hero-based, class-based shooters of the time, like Overwatch. And having cooldowns for everything allows for a higher skill floor when playing. Like, it's a little bit harder to keep track of your cooldowns on stuff than it is to keep track of, oh, I have 2 grenades, let me use them whenever I want. It's not necessarily harder to master, but it's harder to learn it right off the bat. You know, like, it's hard to get used to it, and especially for a Call of Duty game, like, you're not used to it, because now you have to, you know, stay in charge of your health, you have to keep track of your equipment cooldowns when using them. Each specialist has a, you know, special ability. We're just going to call them ultimates because that's exactly what they are from Overwatch. And you gain this as the match goes on, but none of the ultimates seem really broken, but you still have to keep track of all of this. And that to me has a higher skill floor than the average Call of Duty game. But I'm also not the best judge for multiplayer balancing. And also, this doesn't feel like Call of Duty. Like, the shooting feels like Call of Duty. The shooting and the gunplay, Call of Duty verbatim. But the way the equipment works, the way the health works, the way the special abilities work, all this stuff doesn't really feel like Call of Duty. And I don't mind it, but I could see somebody hating it. David Vonderhaar also talks about the game is back to being boots on the ground with no thruster packs and no wall running, which I prefer because it feels more like a natural progression off of Black Ops 2, which was something that I didn't like about Black Ops 3's movement. He mentions that they did this because it's a tactical shooter in quotation marks, and that's just fancy phrasing for saying that there's abilities and you have to work as a team. That's the paraphrasing for a tactical shooter. He mentions that you shouldn't have this level of dimension in a tactical game, like where you have wall running and thruster packs. And he mentions this is the type of game that you don't want that level of dimension in with the thruster packs and wall running. Even though literally every Call of Duty has some level of verticality to them, and almost every tactical shooter like Overwatch, as your biggest inspiration for this game, has characters flying around the map. It was a very odd explanation that I think could just be interchanged for that Activision did not want them to do that shit after Infinite Warfare. I think that it was very clear that they didn't really want to do futuristic Call of Duties, but Treyarch wanted to finish up Black Ops 4, and Activision said, okay, you can do this futuristic Call of Duty, but do not, I repeat, do not have exosuits. And I think that was their main reasoning. His odd explanation makes no sense to me. Like, you can't have wall running or thruster pack in that level of dimension in a tactical game like this. Like, no, there's multiple tactical games that have that level of dimension. That doesn't make any sense to me. I see no reason why this game couldn't have thruster packs and wall running, and I can see why people would hate this game so much with no campaign and none of the stuff that Black Ops 3 fans love. I prefer the boots on the grounds, but I don't think that makes the complaints about Black Ops 4's slower paced multiplayer any less valid, because it is slower paced due to the cooldowns. It is slower paced due to the fact that you don't have that thruster pack, don't have that wall running, don't have that advanced movement. But I prefer it only due to the fact that all of the items like specialist classes and cooldowns feel a little bit more like competitive Black Ops 2 to me. And I enjoy Black Ops 2's multiplayer significantly more than Black Ops 3's. It's biased, but that's where my preferences are. I enjoy the health system a lot because it gives me more stuff to keep track of. And I said the same thing about Call of Duty World War II's campaign. I do enjoy the health pack system. I enjoy keeping track of that stuff. Vonderhaar also speaks about the spawning being improved after working with Battle.net. And I don't really know how much truth there is to this. They switched over, like Activision and Blizzard combined around this time period. And they might have just been trying to come up with an excuse to promote Battle.net and like promote the Blizzard stuff. I can confirm that the spawning significantly improved in Black Ops 4, but I don't believe that was from Battle.net. And I don't believe that was from combining with Blizzard. Like, I just don't buy that. That sounds like a business thing where they're like, oh, we did a merger. We want to make it sound like that merger was worth it. So let's talk about spawning. Like, it just seems like such an off-topic thing to bring up, especially because nowadays their spawning sucks again. You know, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, even somewhat Cold War, these games don't really have good spawns. The problems for this game, though, once again lie in the fact that the game was basically dead after 1 to 2 years, even though it was promised to be this live service big, updated game over the years, and the competitive experience was going to be so huge, and Blackout was going to be the new thing. This is the problem with all Call of Duty experiences, but especially the esports community ones, where with a game like this, where it kind of is the ultimate tactical Call of Duty experience. They have the cooldowns for everything. Everybody's got their classes. It's class-based. It's completely different from past Call of Duty games in that regard. It doesn't even feel like Call of Duty at times, but they don't keep up with it at all. Like, it's just like there's nothing to play. Like, I can't play anything on this freaking game. The last thing I'm going to talk about, and I'm done with the David Vonderhaar interview and going over that. The last thing I want to talk about with the multiplayer is, once again, we got maps. We got to talk about the maps. And most of the maps in this game are just remakes of classic maps like Flooded Jungle, like a remake of Jungle from Black Ops 1, which I find the water gameplay to actually be really enjoyable in this game. I'm only surprised by this too, is because I normally hate swimming in video games. Swimming just looks gross to me. I hate how slowed down the pace is, and it gives me flashbacks to when I would jump out of a helicopter in GTA 4, and then I'd be stuck out in the middle of the ocean, and I'd have to swim 15 minutes to get back to shore. It gives me PTSD. I hated that so much. Other maps like Hacienda and Contraband are solid. There's no real standout maps here, though, but none are incompetent. Like, if you hop on them a couple years later, you'll still remember the layout because, like we said earlier, 90% of Call of Duty maps all have the same layout. This review in general sounds very neutral, and that's because it is. This game has some stuff I love about it, but it's constantly undercut by the fact that you literally can't play a third of it anymore with Blackout, and the multiplayer, which is another third of the game, basically is dead. Like, you find a few matches every now and then. I can't even tell if there are hackers on the game or not, and I don't really care. You don't really often get full matches, and sometimes you'll just be sitting in a lobby for, 2 hours trying to find a match. Like, it's ridiculous. And it is fun, but it's just a pain to find a match in the first place. The new customization gunsmith system, I will say, is actually insane. I didn't really learn a lot about it until a couple years after the game came out, but from a cosmetic standpoint, you can literally create like unicorn guns without paying hundreds of dollars for skins. And you actually unlock stuff for your guns at a pretty good pace in this game. Like, they supported you just playing the game naturally and getting really cool cosmetics for your weaponry. If you have a group of friends, I suggest playing the multiplayer together. I really do. Give this game another shot. It really has great gameplay elements. It's got a really fun multiplayer. But if you're by yourself, then I don't really know what to say. It's just hard to find anything. And Blackout, I don't even remember enjoying all that much, but it's not even playable at this point, so I can't even actually review it. Like, I would review it, but I really don't remember it. And I would have to watch a bunch of gameplay videos to remember it and to be able to review it. And I just, why? Like, it's literally just a crappier Warzone at this point, or at least Warzone 1. I know everyone hates Warzone 2. I haven't even played Warzone 2, and I don't care. It's a game that's hard to talk about due to the dead state it's in, but I can talk about zombies, which zombies is cool, right? But before that, there's also these specialist campaign-esque missions, but they're basically tutorial levels, and they have no real purpose outside of teaching you how to play the class. They disguise themselves with small cutscenes that try to make you think it's a campaign, but don't let it fool you. This is not a campaign. And literally nobody, I repeat, nobody on God's green earth played these. So without further ado, let's just talk about zombies. Jason Blundell continues to be the one in charge of these things, and I do think the Voyage of Despair and 9 are significant improvements over the base game Black Ops 3 lineup. You also get Blood of the Dead, and I would assume this is because Mob of the Dead was a fan favorite, and it was also Jason Blundell's first zombies map, but is a remake of Mob of the Dead. This time around, it's also great because they give you a difficulty meter, which lets you choose if you want to play on casual or hardcore zombies, and this is awesome because if you want to have deep philosophical, weird conversations with your buddy, then you're going to play on casual, and if you want to actually just play some standard difficulty, nice, hard zombies that's reminiscent of the older games, you will pick the standard difficulty. These maps also follow the tried and true formula of big areas that are surrounded by transitioning hallways that are narrow areas that allow for those intense segments in between areas where you can watch out for zombies. You're going from a big area to a big area, and in between those is really tight areas that you could die if you're not careful. But in those big areas, you can train zombies, hold off hordes. Also, wait a second. So not only did he mimic the old map designs that are great in Black Ops 4 with Voyage of Despair, 9, and Blood of the Dead, but also did Blundell restrain himself on having Easter eggs pretty much lock everything? 9, you just kill 4 bosses, collect their heads, and then you get Pack-a-Punch. And sure, you might need to look up that you have to summon the bosses by hitting this gong thing, but like, it's not that big of a stretch, and like, it's much simpler than Transit or Shadows of Evil. And on Voyage of Despair, you just have to activate some pedestals, which you can find by naturally exploring the map, and then you have Pack-a-Punch. This is a lot simpler, and Blood of the Dead is just a remake of a great DLC map in Black Ops 2. You zombie fans can correct me down below, but this seems just a lot simpler. So I like the difficulty meter that you can change. I like that you can switch out perks when you play on these zombies maps. You can pick which ones you prefer to get in the 4 perks that are on the map, or 5. It gives me reasons to go back and retry the map with a new set of perk. It also prevents a lot of the perks from being on one map, which can be frustrating from a freedom perspective, but to me it makes the game just a little bit harder, which I like. Just solid zombie maps all around. It might be my favorite base game ones from Blundell. It might be, honestly. I really like 9. I really like Voyage of Despair, and I mean Mob of the Dead's a good map, and I think Blood of the Dead is just a good remake of that map. It ranges from being on the fucking Titanic in Voyage of Despair and a massive gladiator stadium in 9, 2 completely different environments, and that's something people like. Transit was kind of boring because in all the maps in Black Ops 2's base game, because they're all just this apocalyptic area. This map actually is like, oh no, this is the Titanic and this is a gladiator arena. Okay, very, very different, giving you a lot of variety in your zombies maps. So I like that a lot. It's great, especially in comparison to the year before this, 2017's Call of Duty World War II Zombies, which the map was just abysmal for that game. Not abysmal, but it's very mediocre. So like, my thoughts on Black Ops 4 are kind of strange but short. I didn't play this one as much as you can tell from all the other titles in the series, but I will say that if a campaign was announced for this game, it just would have been hated instantly, so I get why they didn't have it. It's just weird rating this game because they did replace it with Blackout and more zombies maps, but Blackout's dead, and having 3 zombie maps replace a campaign is just criminal, especially when Black Ops 1 and 2 already had 3 zombie maps in the base game. It's kind of the black sheep of the entire series, or at least the entire Black Ops series, if I'm being honest. There's not a single game that I hear less about outside of Call of Duty 3 or Vanguard. Black Ops 4 is just what I wouldn't say it's a bad game, especially in its prime, but it sure lacks the content that made Black Ops 3 as memorable as it is. It also lacks the development put into zombies that made 1 as memorable as it is, and it lacks the development in multiplayer that made 2 as memorable as it is. It basically just lacks on the development side in general, because it was abandoned the moment Modern Warfare 2019 dropped. And that's the thing that bothers me the most, is that this game probably could have been great if they actually stuck with it. And it lacks the content quantity that almost every other Treyarch game had before this. Like, I would argue that Black Ops 1, World at War, Black Ops 2, and Black Ops 3 all have more content than Black Ops 4. It's just not worth buying simply because you can't really play it unless you got a group of people to play with, or if you only care about zombies. Otherwise, I just wouldn't bother. Black Ops 4 was the last game until they switched engines, and it was the last game of the Dark Ages, and man, does it feel like it. Feels like Activision for the first time in a while had just released a filler game to fill the gap between their free battle royale and their massive hit title, Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Oh, no. I'm getting deja vu. Did they really make Treyarch make a filler title before Modern Warfare 2007, then have them make another filler title before Modern Warfare 2019? I appreciate so much in this game, guys. I really do. But it just doesn't have a lot to talk about, especially not in its current state in 2023, which is sad because honestly, if this game still had full lobbies, and if it still had a full blackout mode, and if I had plenty of people to play online with in multiplayer and in zombies, it might be one of my favorite games of the Dark Ages, because there is a lot of the gameplay changes that I love, and there's a lot of the stuff in general I really like. But alas, Call of Duty annual releases, Warzone, Activision, and a new engine that came out has just left this game in the fucking dust. The dust only known as the Dark Ages, as we drag our way out of this storm and enter the resurgence period that ranged from 2019 to present day. And with arguably only 2 good games in the resurgence period, with Modern Warfare 2019 and Black Ops Cold War. And damn right, you heard me clearly. Black Ops Cold War is a good game. It's probably the best game of the resurgence period in its current state in 2023. And I'll explain why after explaining the development leading to it. Guys, we're in their last game. Treyarch had proved themselves. They were at the top. I mean, sure, Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4 were arguably not as good as their peak, but these guys were still top dog. Like, especially even in the Dark Ages, these guys were top dog. Like, people loved Treyarch as the #1 Call of Duty company. They went from arguably creating their worst Call of Duty game, Call of Duty 3, to making a few of not only the best Call of Duty games, but some of the best first-person shooters available in the years they came out. Treyarch was becoming a studio that Activision relied upon to help make a Call of Duty game whenever others needed help due to the consistency in their games and their speed. Making a World at War multiplayer in less than 6 months, making Call of Duty 3 in less than 8 months. Activision knows that Treyarch can pump out a game quickly, and so they would constantly ask for their help with other studios and the other developers that were making Call of Duty games because they trusted Treyarch by this point. So finally, when 2019 came around, only a year after the release of Black Ops 4, Activision was wondering, wonder where Sledgehammer Games is at with their Call of Duty game that's due for a 2020 release date. And they asked, and they found out that barely any progress had been made. This is the beginning of the creation of what would come to be known as Black Ops Cold War that came out in 2020. Apparently, Sledgehammer Games and Raven Software were supposed to be working hand in hand on this game, but both companies were at each other's throats and didn't even want to work together. Apparently, there was so much bickering that the two companies won't even stay in contact anymore. Activision told Sledgehammer to start working on Vanguard, and Treyarch got thrown to take over as lead developer on the 2020 title. They had less than 2 years to create Black Ops Cold War, which for a game this size and this detailed, that is extreme crunch time. So a lot of people complain that Black Ops Cold War doesn't use the new Modern Warfare 2019 engine. But I wonder why. It's because Treyarch was on such an extreme crunch time that they probably felt more comfortable using the IW engine and just modifying it from the 2007 Modern Warfare, which is exactly what they did. They just modified it for Cold War and made it look like the new engine. Raven Software was assigned to take Craig Houston's script that was based on story treatments that him and David S. Goyer came up with. Yes, David S. Goyer did return to help out with this one. But if you dive into some research and find out who was in charge on this game, you'll find that a lot of the names that pop up are not people that made the previous titles with Treyarch. This is actually very inaccurate. There's a common misconception here. So Raven Software created the campaign for this game. They took the script that Craig Houston wrote and they made the campaign out of it. So most of the names listed are just a mix and match between the studios of Treyarch and Raven Software because Raven Software did the campaign. So people who are not listed, like the classic artist Cullen Whitney, he was still working at Treyarch and he was still helping out with Call of Duty Cold War, but he just doesn't get listed when like you go on like the Wikipedia page or go on another website and see who were the people behind this stuff. They were still helping, they're just not listed because most of the people listed are the Raven Software team. This is Raven's first full campaign for Call of Duty, and Treyarch got to put full focus on zombies and multiplayer, but Jason Blundell left Activision. The head game director, the zombies director, and one of the co-studio heads of Treyarch, one of the OGs for 13 years working at Treyarch, left. He left in February of 2020, which I would assume is right after he finished creating the scripts and the concepts for the zombies mode for Vanguard as well as for Cold War. I would assume like they were still working on it and he just created all the concepts and moved on. Overall, Black Ops Cold War had a rough development period of only probably about 1.5 years, with dozens of studios helping out. It's why when you see the intro, there's 40 bajillion studios that pop up on the intro screen, and a campaign that wasn't even developed by Treyarch. And honestly, after the game came out and during the game's release, a lot of senior Treyarch employees left the studio. I will go over that and where every developer has gone in true documentary fashion, but I will talk about the game itself first. 2020, man. That year fucking sucked. And video game sales were only increasing because of it. Coincidence? I think not. Nobody had anything to do this year, so naturally people sat around, they played Animal Crossing and Doom Eternal, and therefore video game sales were actually pretty high in the year of 2020. Which, by the way, Doom Eternal is literally one of the greatest first-person shooters ever. So if you haven't checked it out, do yourself a favor and play it. Call of Duty contemplated not releasing a game in 2020 due to not only the development hell I just described, but also COVID hit the studio, and most had to work from home for quite a while. Activision really should have just delayed it, but seeing the increase in video game sales probably spawned dollar symbols in the eyes of stock investors. Black Ops Cold War dropped in a rough state. If I was to get into absolutely everything that made this multiplayer rough upon release, I would be here all day. So I'm just going to leave in the description down below a massive list that breaks down about 30 or so things that were wrong with this game when it first came out in terms of multiplayer everything. But I'm going to talk about a few kind of important things. There were many overpowered weapons with a heavy focus on SMGs and multiplayer. The netcode was in one of the worst ever for a Call of Duty game with horrible hit detection. I mean, Infinity Ward is normally known for their better hit detection versus these other two studios, but this game in particular, it was just rough. Like, people hated the hit detection in this game. Score streaks never really got fixed in this game, but it was the worst variation of the kill streak system probably ever put into a Call of Duty game. It allows you to get kill streaks through score, which is cool. That's how it was in Black Ops 2, but now you can just die and still get kill streaks. It takes a hell of a lot longer to get kill streaks, but it was made so everyone felt like they were gonna get their kill streaks even if they were bad at the game, which to me isn't the point of kill streaks or score streaks. The point is to avoid dying, which actually helps your team and then rewards your team because you're not dying. I mean, like, I suck at these games, and I would rather not have this like handout system where everybody gets kill streaks in the multiplayer. I think that's just dumb. The multiplayer since launch has improved immensely with the exception of score streaks. Its focus is heavily on party game modes like knife fights, infected, and gun game, and you can still find matches and sure, like there are still some like competitive players on here, whatever. It's still a fairly popular game, but people love the casual game modes on this game, and that's why I like this game a lot, because my personal favorite stuff out of the Resurgence era is things like gunfights, where I could play with me and my friend and we fight a 2v2 match, and it was hilariously enjoyable. It was toxic as hell, it's sweaty, but it's also just a vibe. You're both shooting the shit, you're both hanging out. There's the competitive games, I like the competitive community, whatever, but I'm not really that competitive of a person as it is. I say while saying that I play Gunfight, which is quite literally probably one of the more sweaty modes where you have tournaments that are 2v2 based, but I tend to just like to shoot the shit with my friend and just play the game. This is the only multiplayer in the Resurgence era that actually has a heavy emphasis on party modes. The multiplayer maps, I actually kind of like them, which I know is a rarity for the Resurgence period. A lot of people hate the maps in this period from Modern Warfare 2019 to Modern Warfare 3, and I know a lot of people hate Cold War's maps in particular, but I actually like them quite a bit. I think Cartel is deeply underrated. I think Pines is really fun, and I actually just realized that those are the only two original maps I like. The rest of the maps I like are just remakes of old Black Ops maps, with the exception of the tiny gunfight areas. I yield. The original maps in this game are not very good. Also the case for every game in the Resurgence period, the original maps are pretty bad. There's like 3 or less good original maps in every single game in this period, and that's why the rotation for these modern Call of Duty games suck, because they rotate the same very small group of maps since everyone else hates all the other maps in the game. I feel that the only reason I like this multiplayer is due to the stepping down as a competitive game. They really just wanted it to be a casual party game. Most of the modes are just meant to be relaxed and fun, and I love that. It's fitting, especially after they made possibly their most competitive game with Black Ops 4. I'm a grown man, and when I play Call of Duty, I just want to have a beer and get a few laughs in with friends, so Cold War is just what I needed. And then Warzone is out now, and so Warzone by this point kind of fulfilled that competitive Call of Duty the element that people like. COVID was a lot, though, for a lot of people. And I didn't want to play, you know, games like Valorant when it came out because I didn't need more stress during my job life that year. I wanted to play games like Doom Eternal. There's a game called Post Void that's fantastic if you've never played. It's an indie title. Great first-person shooter. And I wanted to play Cold War, which was just a great pastime killer for me. It's not as good as Doom Eternal. It's not as good as Post Void, but these I have some great pastime killer first-person shooter memories with. And then speaking of fond memories, let's talk about the campaign to Cold War. That's probably the best campaign since Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. We've gone through this whole video, and I never once mentioned a man named Tony Flame, who has worked with Treyarch as a gameplay designer, and he was one of the main creative designers behind the Mission of Vendetta and World at War, and he worked with Raven Software closely on this campaign. Tony Flame's been around for a very long time. He's done a lot for Treyarch, but Raven Software imagined a fantastic campaign that after so many years of indirect storytelling, this is truly the closest that you will get to getting a direct sequel to Black Ops 1. And I love that for all of you Black Ops fans. I know they've changed the voice actors, I know all this stuff, but I love that you guys get a story that's more of a direct sequel to Black Ops 1. Black Ops Cold War takes place with your OG group from Black Ops 1, but this time you play as a new operative, codename Bell. You work underneath CIA operative named Adler, who is by far the coolest new addition to the cast. He's ominous, gets the job done no matter what the cost, and has 3 different stories for how he got scars on his face so you never know the truth, which is just a really fun detail. Adler's working with all of you to find a Soviet named Perseus, who is leading a cause that will put sleeper agents that have been brainwashed like Mason was in Black Ops 1, but puts them all into European countries, so it means that he can slowly turn all these European nations into Soviet nations. He's turning the tide of the Cold War using sleeper agents and nuclear warfare. You work with your team and eventually discover that the big plot twist by the end of the game is that you were a sleeper agent of Perseus. And you can decide to resist Perseus, giving the CIA any information that they would need that would help prevent nuclear disaster, or you can help Perseus and basically cause the world to get effed. Helping the CIA will lead to Adler thanking you. Perseus goes into hiding, and Adler attempts to kill you since he just views you as a loose end to everything. That's the very, very ending of the game. And now let me get this out of the way. There isn't a lot of depth in this game. Like, there's not the depth of Black Ops 1 or Black Ops 2. Woods, Mason, Adler, nobody has an arc like they do in Black Ops 1 or Black Ops 2. There's no major theme surrounding their characters, and really the only slightly interesting part here is the retread of the brainwashing from Black Ops 1 that forces your character to decide if he's going to help out the CIA or help out Perseus. It's not that interesting, it's not subtle, it's not thematic, it's pretty much a retread, and it's not really clever. But it is entertaining as hell. The missions allow for a globe-trotting adventure with a dialogue tree system. This is the first time this has been in the Call of Duty series, something new. A hub world that's not very interesting, but you can have conversations with your teammates, which is great for getting to know those action hero personalities that are back in full force with Frank Woods, Alec Mason, you know, all of them. They don't have the usual mission layouts that can be inspired from other first-person shooters around them. Cold War is interesting in this regard because it feels like most of its inspirations are from the Black Ops series as a whole. Each mission feels like the best version of a mission that you may have seen from Black Ops 1. A good example would be like the recreation of a mission that's similar to WMD from Black Ops 1. It's called Echoes of the Cold War. There's a helicopter piloting mission that feels like an updated payback from Black Ops 1. The multiple endings feels reminiscent of Black Ops 2, or not related to Call of Duty, but the final mission is actually, funny enough, like a Stanley Parable homage, which is so strange to me that that's in a Call of Duty game, but I did really like the mission. You go through like a dreamlike state, and Adler's interrogating you, telling you what you did in this memory that you have accessed, and you can either listen to him in the memory, or you can ignore his narration, which causes him to say something else, and that's very Stanley Parable. Like, oh, you went through the right door, and you can go through the left, and then he'll change what he says in the narration, like, oh, I guess, you know, Bell went through this door instead, and
open doors, he entered the door on his left. This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it.
It's definitely inspired off of Stanley's Parable, but it's a cool mission. I that's the only mission that feels inspired off of another game rather than just the Black Ops series being its main inspiration. Outside of the Stanley Parable thing, everything just feels like a best hits from Black Ops, and while that might annoy some people, I found it entertaining enough, especially considering it's been 10 years since Black Ops 1 came out. The campaign kind of just flew by for me. There's even some side missions to do once again in a Treyarch title, and there's a mission where you can infiltrate like a Soviet base. You disguise yourself, and it plays almost exactly like the mission from Call of Duty World War II in 2017, where you disguise yourself as, I believe it was like a Nazi or something, to gain information. But the difference is that this level in Cold War gives you agency and lets you choose how you are going to go about getting this information. It pretends to go as far as being like an RPG or something, where it adds enough RPG-like elements into this mission to where, like, if you were a kid playing this and really liked it, you would probably be inspired to play other RPG games, and that does put a smile on my face. I love to see games try to give kids a little bit of motivation to maybe try something outside their comfort zone. It doesn't go the full mile. It's not like things are completely different if you do it one way or another, but being able to present that to people who may only play Call of Duty, it might inspire somebody to go play another RPG, like, you know, Fallout New Vegas, or, you know, a Bethesda title, whatever, you know, I don't know, Baldur's Gate 3, and may inspire them to play one of these games, and that, to me, makes me happy. When games embrace their inspirations, like how this game embraces the Black Ops storyline, this game embraces that Stanley Parable homage, this game embraces, you know, slight RPG elements, and it can inspire children or people who just play Call of Duty to play other games with similar design choices, it's charming, especially for a Call of Duty game to do these massive leaps and bounds, like adding a dialogue tree, or adding multiple decisions you can make in that one RPG mission, or adding different ways that the game can end. That all can inspire people to play different games, and I love mainstream games that are willing to do that. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War has all the variety, the action heroes are back, and the fun character personalities, but it lacks actual original substance. It feels reach-ready a lot of the time due to being a first direct sequel in the series, and that could be due to reaching for nostalgia after an underwhelming campaign with Black Ops 3 and then no campaign in Black Ops 4. Because even when I described the plot earlier, you gotta admit it just kind of sounds like Black Ops 1, which once again, very entertaining. It doesn't have the level of, you know, a complexity, and it's not as interesting for a franchise that's given me movie level storytelling in Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2. Still, I'll admit, Raven Software did a fantastic job on adapting this Craig Houston screenplay, and if you didn't tell me it was made by Raven Software, I would have just assumed it was a Treyarch game. The dialogue tree was a nice touch, and that extends off the variation provided by Black Ops 2, but that comes at a little bit of a cost with less customization and less replayability features that were obviously toned down or not as focused on in favor of this dialogue tree system. Honestly, I really wish they would bring back those death cards from World at War. I know that's such a minor thing, but those cheat code cards were fun. They added extra challenge, they added extra fun value to the storyline, and they added a lot more replayability. This time around, they took out split-screen co-op, which is sad to see, but it's understandable. The game was so laggy on Black Ops 3, and it looks considerably better than that game, so I couldn't imagine the split-screen co-op working in the campaign. I know I said it wasn't made with the new engine earlier, but you can't even tell graphically because they modified the old IW engine so much that it nearly looks identical to the Modern Warfare 2019 engine, with the exception of lighting. The lighting is really the only part about this game that looks a little bit worse than Modern Warfare 2019, but like I don't really know this. If you didn't tell me it was made with the old engine, I wouldn't be able to tell. The fact that just all of this entire game was made in 1.5 years is just so impressive to me. It's sad that the developers had to deal with that, but I'm just so impressed that they were able to produce all of this in that little time. And we haven't even got into zombies yet. Come on! We get Firebase Z, a new zombies map, Outbreak, which is basically open world zombies. We get Dead Ops Arcade 3. We get Darmar Toten. I think that's how I'm pronouncing it. We get Dai Machina. I think that's how you no, that's not how you pronounce it. God, that was awful pronunciation. And Forsaken. So I'm going to talk about three of these that I feel like discussing, while the others are fine but nothing real special. I want to talk about Forsaken, Outbreak, and Dead Ops Arcade 3. Those are all different enough from each other. I feel like there's new things to talk about, and they're all pretty solid. The rest of the maps are still good, and they came with the game for free updates, which makes this arguably have the best base game zombies available out of the entire series. I know I feel like I say that with every other title, but to be honest, this is like a great base game zombies, especially with all the free updates that the game has added as time has gone on. But first up, let's talk about Dead Ops Arcade 3. Dead Ops Arcade is interesting because it doesn't really evolve as much as the other zombies material. They do add stuff, but something about it just never really feels like too much different from the previous iterations. One thing they do add this time though, besides just new areas, they do a lot of new areas with Dead Ops Arcade 3. The Dead Ops Arcade game in first person, with all the same power-ups, gold, silver icons everywhere, these massive freaking things that you pick up while running around, and it's pretty fun. Like, I had a really good time playing first-person Dead Ops Arcade. I just found it to be a blast. It's such a novelty. It's so gimmicky. I wouldn't be mad if it's not in the next game, but I did kill some time on it. Outbreak is a map I thought I was going to hate, and it's not the most original map out there. In fact, actually, it's just kind of a bunch of woods, but with some multiplayer map layouts that are interconnected in this open world that's just transitioned through woods. And I thought I was going to hate it because I thought it was going to be extremely easy, way too slow, but it's actually the opposite. It's probably the hardest zombies map in this game. It turns out it's made for people like me. According to the developers, they mentioned Outbreak was made for people who just wanted the straightforward surviving against zombie hordes experience and only wanted fast-paced gameplay. And I'm surprised, but Outbreak does do all of this. And it has only been improved over the years. They've added bosses to the map. They've added giant creatures. And the game mode can get so difficult that I can die within the first few rounds if I'm not careful. Outbreak's grown on me a lot. And even though I still don't understand anything about the map after hours of playtime, like I feel like you could ask me, hey, what area are you going to go to as soon as you start up Outbreak? And I would have no idea. I do feel I get my money's worth though every time I play on it. It's fast-paced, and that's really what I want. I'm curious about playing more and more of it as the years go on, but who knows? I don't know how much longer I'll spend on most of these Call of Duty games after making these videos. Being chased by hundreds of zombies in the woods is my idea of a wet dream for zombies. It's so much fun. It's just such a blast. Forsaken is one that's kind of the more standard Call of Duty Zombies map. It's the one standard one I picked. You can activate the teleporters like in classic zombies, and they'll take you to this radiation-filled room that's the pack-a-punch room, and you have a limited time in there or else you're gonna die. I do think finding the parts for the teleporter is a bit tedious, but overall I was having a blast, and probably because my friend was doing a lot of it. I was just kind of chilling out and admiring the 80s town aesthetics while fighting zombies and just surviving on this massive map that manages to still be hard and interesting in terms of design, due to Treyarch actually caring about the zombies in this game, unlike the zombies in Vanguard. All these other maps are fine. They might even be better than fine, but I truthfully just have not played too much of these because this game has a lot of zombie stuff going on. I feel like I've played these 3 zombie maps quite a bit, and I still don't know everything about them. I still haven't explored them that much, and I've played the other 3, but it's normally like 1-2 rounds, and I don't feel like commenting on them a bunch if I haven't even played them too much. But they're good. I mean, they all seem like they're fairly developed. I don't want to jinx myself on that. I could hop on one, I could hate it, I could love it. There's a total of 6 base game zombie maps on this game, and that's insane. They all have different modes that mix it up and add more variety, and it's the biggest base game zombies in the series if you don't count the custom community made maps in Black Ops 3. I know these modern Call of Duty games can get greedy in other areas. I know I say I'm not talking about paid content. I don't want to make that sound like that I'm saying that the modern Call of Duty games, oh, they have all these free updates, so therefore they're better, because there is just a lot of greed in other areas, specifically cosmetics or battle passes or releasing a DLC and just calling it Modern Warfare 3 for $70. I honestly, my philosophy is that if I pay for a $70 game, then it should just have everything in it. But you want to know what? Activision's never going to do that, and that's why I'm not talking about it in this video. We'll get more into that stuff also in the part 4 of this series, where I'm going to talk about the state of Call of Duty and go through kind of everything that I'm not liking about all this. I'm going completely off topic because I'm done reviewing these now. I'm done. I refuse to talk about this anymore until the Infinity Ward video, and I might drop a few small videos before I release the Infinity Ward retrospective, but it will come out eventually. These just take me a very long time to make. They just do. Now, it is only fitting, though, that we give the developers the send-off that we have discussed throughout the video, and I'm going to give them, you know, a whole send-off. It's going to feel like an 80s sitcom. Corky Limcall, who is the game director at Treyarch Studios. He is still the game director at Treyarch Studios. Jason Blundell and Tony Flame joined Dave Anthony's new game studio that was formed by himself and Blundell called Deviation Games. It was bought by PlayStation Studios to supposedly create a PlayStation exclusive Call of Duty competitor with multiple Treyarch alumni. Might be part of the fact that PlayStation announced that they were coming out with a bunch of live service games, so they wanted to increase the amount of focus on live service games, and so this might be a part of that. They might be trying to create a Call of Duty competitor by grabbing in a bunch of Treyarch alumni. In May of 2023, they laid off about 90 people, which we don't know if that's most of the staff or not. It just depends on how much they grew since 2021, because in 2021, I think they only had like 100 people working there from what I read online. But this is all the internet, so who knows? Jason Blundell did leave Deviation Games soon after it was finished forming, though. But Tony Flame and Dave Anthony are still there. David Vonderhaar left after 18 years of being the head of gameplay and has confirmed he is working on an undisclosed game. Possibly the one that all the other Treyarch alumni are working on. Possibly the PlayStation one. Who knows? But best of luck to you. He's been working as the head of gameplay for 18 years. Jimmy Zielinski went from the Zombies developer to now he's an animation lead at Ubisoft. And I could not find any games that he's credited with, but it says he started in 2021. So I don't know. Maybe there is a couple. Craig Houston is still working at Treyarch as their lead writer and now on Zombies as well, after taking over for Vanguard Zombies from Jason Blundell. David King, as far as I know, is still the lead technical engineer and programmer. I still know nothing about this man, but he is one of the leaders there, and so I feel he's worth mentioning. This is still the only picture I can find of him. Whatever, dude. You know, you do your thing. You're obviously doing a good job at doing what you do. You've been there since Call of Duty 3, so keep on going. Pat Dwyer, who is one of the lead producers for Treyarch, also recently left the company and joined PlayStation, possibly on Deviation Games Company. I don't know, but they joined. I mean, he joined PlayStation. That was recently announced. So it seems a lot of Treyarch employees have been joining PlayStation, or at least Treyarch leadership. Brian Toohey is still the audio director with Treyarch, and then Sean Murray and Jack Wall are still rocking out, with Sean Murray doing some side work on movies and Jack Wall still with Call of Duty. Multiple senior developers from Treyarch have left and joined PlayStation, which that's the most interesting thing about all of this, to be honest. Recently, PlayStation, announced that they were working on live service games, and I don't know if this is going to be a Call of Duty competitor. I have no idea, but there needs to be more competition against Call of Duty, especially after the terrible reception of Modern Warfare 3. Now is a time more than ever to create a Call of Duty competitor. I think that could really, really stir up the competition in the first-person shooter genre. Jason Blundell and the laying off of the employees is the only disheartening news about the company, but hopefully it'll still go out well. I mean, Dave Anthony's still there, and so is Tony Flame. And Pat Dwyer just joined the PlayStation, so like Jason Blundell leaving and the laying off of employees is really the only thing that seems disheartening, but I don't know what's going to happen, so we'll see. The one thing that is for certain, though, is between all these developers and where they are today, all of them spent so much time creating amazing games for us. And I think that it's just, we want to give them all a moment to kind of fly off in the sunset via their little documentary exit. Everybody being able to go off and do their own thing or still work with Treyarch. And this has been appreciation culture, where we have seen a long journey for Treyarch, one that started off with no faith and no trust, We have seen them gain more trust than Infinity Ward at this point, which is insane, and create some of the greatest first-person shooters ever. It's an amazing underdog story, and it just shows with a series like Call of Duty, one that people pick on a lot. And even I do. I pick on Call of Duty all the time. I hate a lot of stuff about Call of Duty, and I hate a lot of what it does for the gaming world. But they're still passionate, caring developers who want to make the best out of this medium. And sometimes they manage to make some truly amazing achievements with Treyarch. We've seen it through the entire Golden Age. And we've seen them make a full-blown modern 2020 game in less than 2 years with the help of Raven Software. Like, these are talented developers, and my only hope is that they can get the time off they deserve. They get the rest they deserve. They get the pay they deserve. Treyarch has proven in this retrospective that they can go from the bottom to the top, and they did it quickly. They were able to become a competitor to Infinity Ward almost immediately, and that shows how strong of a studio this is that Activision owns. That shows how great these developers are. And I can't predict the future, but I just wonder how different things will be with Jason Blundell gone now and with Pat Dwyer gone as well. Treyarch has only a couple of its senior team left, and I'm sure all the new people are talented as well. I'm not saying that they aren't talented. I just wonder if they'll still pour as much passion into it as the senior team did. I wish the developers good luck on their own journeys, onto new projects that I can't wait to play in the future. And I hope that the future leaders care as much about Black Ops and Call of Duty as these people did. Thank you so much for watching, by the way. I really put my all into this video, and I appreciate any of you who stuck around for the entirety of it. Oh my gosh, that helped me out immensely. This is a commitment video, and I would love for you to join me on my Infinity Ward video, as well as my future video games and film videos. A massive part of appreciation culture is to combat the rage culture, combat the hype culture by just making well thought out evaluations and always finding stuff to appreciate in every video game, because in the end of the day, these are all works of art. So please subscribe, please like, follow, ring that bell, whatever it is you gotta do, all that YouTube stuff, and I will see you all in the Infinity Ward retrospective. The Modern Warfare 3 and State of Call of Duty video, that will be my last one, and I'll also do a ranking of all the Call of Duty games. And hopefully I also see you in any other future videos I decide to do. Thank you, appreciators, for watching this. Jump on board the appreciation train where you can become a true appreciator, because we are all going to be appreciating every single little piece of art out there. And I will see you there.